What's up, everyone? Welcome to the BreadCast. I'm your host, Bread to Kill You All, and do a watch party. For some of you, this will probably be a repeat, but I'm hoping we can catch some new people to, get some truth out there. Tonight's presentation, to start with at least, will be WalterVeith, the Trump card, which exposes relationships between people. I'll let it explain itself, I guess. What's the relation between past presidents and candidates? And happy Sabbath, everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and start this, and won't be too much commentary, really. But we'll, maybe. If I do, I'll pause it, though.
I've titled this little talk, The Trump Card. Now, in politics, we can always expect the unexpected. And the world was certainly taken by surprise when Donald Trump won the American presidential election. Now, in politics, we are taken by surprise, but in prophecy, we have certainty. And when we look at the prophetic picture of the book of Revelation, then we can see that there is a plan and there is a movement in a particular direction. And even though it looks confusing out there and sometimes doesn't work according to our expectations, the plan will be fulfilled according to the prophetic picture. In Revelation, we read that the second beast will form an image to the first beast. Now, the first beast was identified by the Protestant world as the papal system, and the second beast was looked at in the Protestant context, and Wesley, in his time, expected that it would soon appear. And the only one that fulfills all the criteria of the second beast is the United States of America, that would make an image to the first beast. Now, the first beast, as we know, was a politico-religious system that dominated world events and world affairs. And so the second system will be the same, where politics and religion will be mingled with each other and will elevate the first beast in the process. Now, that is what the prophetic scenario says. And sometimes when we look at events in history, it seems as though the exact opposite is happening. JFK said the following: "I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president, who might appoint him, or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will directly or indirectly upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all." So Kennedy still stood for the absolute separation of church and state. Now, if the prophecy is to be fulfilled, then this situation must change, because the image must be like the original. And the original was church and state dictating morality to society. And so the second beast must, if it's to become an image, do exactly the same. Now, I believe one of the reasons why Kennedy disappeared from the scene and was assassinated was because he stood for these principles, besides other things that he did, like touch the Federal Reserve, etc. Now, under the two-party state in the United States, we seem to think that you are either voting for one system or another system. But that is, in fact, not the case. Quigley, who was, Bill Clinton's favorite professor, said the following in his Tragedy and Hope. The argument of two parties should represent opposed ideas and policies. One perhaps of the right and the other of the left is a foolish idea acceptable only to doctrinate and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical, so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policy. The policies that are vital and necessary for America are no longer subject of significant disagreement, but are disputable only in details of procedure, priority, or method. In other words, what he's saying is that the two-party system is there just to appease the populace, but the general direction will be puppet master is in control. And sometimes even high officials can be misled or be thinking that they are doing one thing when they are actually propagating something else. Now, this is how the Hegelian dialectic works. If we have a look at a definition, it says it's a framework for guiding thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to synthetic solutions which can only be introduced once those being manipulated take a side that will advance the predetermined agenda. So there's controlled opposition, problem, reaction, solution. Now, this has been used for millennia in the political sphere. You create the crisis to induce the change, to bring about the direction that you really want everyone to go. But you have to swing the general mindset in a particular direction in order to get there. Now, let's assume you want a particular religious agenda to be instituted, and you know that secular society will not fall for that idea. Then you can bring in this dialectic and bring in an opposing view, bring in an opposite view which becomes totally unacceptable to the general populace, forcing them in a direction where they will eventually embrace that which you wanted all along, but had they remained middle of the road, they would never have accepted such a solution. So this is a method of mind control, mass mind control. Now, when we look at the Obama legacy, then this becomes apparent. He's the one who said Trump is unfit to serve as president. And Donald Trump was using all the failures of the past administration to highlight his points. I mean, if you look at the entire world, it's in chaos. Refugees are streaming in all over. Bombs are exploding. ISIS is out of control. And all of these issues play on the minds of people and is herding them in a particular direction where they want to ensconce themselves and protect themselves from these waves of evil that are rolling in upon society, and then perhaps doing exactly that which prophecy said they would do, which they would not normally have done had the circumstances been different. So what is the legacy of Obama and Hillary Clinton? Well, it is a liberal agenda. We have seen so many changes in society and so many laws being brought in where, well, a Christian morality seems to be decimated, nothing left of it. so that those that have a Christian ethic would want to scream out and say, we have to change this world. It can no longer carry on like this. And this is exactly what you do. You swing the pendulum to absolute liberalism in every sphere, and then you let it go and let it swing to the other side so that you can get exactly what you want and what prophecy predicts. Obama is the one who said the future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. Now, if you look at the web pages, there's so much conjecture as to whether the man was perhaps a clandestine Muslim. And there are pictures of his ring, which tends to be Islamic, and there are pictures of him in Islamic dress, and many, many statements to this effect. And if you look at the administration, many high officials are of the Muslim faith. So it seems as if America was being taken away from its Christian roots and swung in another direction. But prophecy said that the second beast, the United States of America, would implement legislation that would further the first beast, which is Catholicism. And therefore it must be a Christian nation bringing about Christian legislation. And here you had Obama taking the mindset in a totally opposite direction. This is a brilliant Hegelian dialectic. Whether he knew about what he was doing, whether he did it consciously or whether he did it subconsciously is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, this is what has happened. I believe, of course, that the insider elite is pretty clued up as to what the agenda is, but nevertheless, one can leave open the option that they might have done it unknowingly. But this was the legacy. And now, with the Trump administration, we are going to probably see the pendulum swing. Catholic Herald, Obama calls for world leaders to heed Pope Francis's message. The President of the United States said he wants fellow world leaders to reflect on Pope Francis' encyclical talking about the environment. So you have this dichotomy of thought. On the one hand, you have this movement towards a totally different religious system, and on the other hand, you have this underpinning of the papal system. And under his leadership, you had the visit of Pope Francis, where he went through the entire procedure, almost like a president of the world being inaugurated, speaking from the balcony, which is a step higher than any of the presidents have done. So you have this dichotomy of thought. You have, on the one hand, the appearance that it's moving in this direction, and on the other hand, the realities of the laws that it's moving in another direction. And then you had the two opponents. You had the one standing for the principles of the right, the other one standing for the principles on the left, and it was a vicious campaign. Now, is this a dialectic, a Hegelian dialectic? Is this a game of good cop, bad cop, or two ideologies which are to undergo pendulum swing? Well, let's have a look at some of the facts without judging any of the individuals and see whether we can come up with some form of conclusion. Here we have the famous supper, the so-called charity supper that takes place just before the election, where you have the Archbishop of New York, who always is the head of the Knights of Malta in America, where he has this meal with the candidates that are to be elected for president. And you can see the jovial nature. This is church and state at its best. And the two of them smiling next to Cardinal Dolan. Now it's interesting when you look at the actions of these individuals, you also get this idea of this dialectic. I mean, if you take the Cardinal, for example, the papacy will make one statement, a very conservative statement, let's say with regard to whatever, lifestyle choices or contraception, the papacy will make one statement, and the people who are supposed to live it out will do exactly the opposite. So you're confused. You're thinking, why are the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta doing the exact opposite of what the papacy has just proclaimed? Why do you have this dichotomy of thought? Well, you see, in this thinking, there's this yin-yang aspect. The white aspect and the black aspect, well, they augment each other. The one cannot exist without the other, so they say, in this yin-yang philosophy. So even within the ranks of the church, you have this dichotomy of thought. Now, the two candidates, as we will see, fit the bill in every single aspect. If you go to the web pages and you look at the bloodlines of the American presidents, then it is a known fact that all the presidents that have, well, reigned in the United States have all been related. So let's have a look at what the media has to say. If all presidents are related, which of the 2017 candidates will be the next president? As it turns out, both Trump and Hillary Clinton are related to John of Gaunt, a 14th century royal. Gaunt was the first Duke of Lancaster, who was the son of King Edward III, according to MyHeritage. Trump is related through his mother, Mary Ann McLeod, back to his 17th grandfather, John Beaufort, while Clinton is related through her father and the Rodham family back to the 17th great-grandmother, Joan Beaufort. The two candidates are 19th cousins, and so they both have the right bloodlines to continue this lineage. Now, that's another story as to why they should all be related, and it's fascinating that the Bible doesn't speak about the presidents of the world, it speaks about the kings of the world. And it really, over the course of history, hasn't mattered which of the candidates has won, because the candidates have always both been in the same bloodlines. Here are the American presidential bloodlines. Here's another page that explains this. Did you know all 44 US presidents have carried European royal bloodlines into office? 34 have been genetic descendants of just one person, Charlemagne, the brutal 8th century king of the Franks. Now, that's a fascinating story, because Charlemagne is, of course, the one who was crowned emperor of the Roman Empire, the new Roman Empire, and the Pope was crowning him whilst his kingdom was falling apart. So he's a symbol of this unity of the world under one leadership, the papacy. And then if we go to Edward III of England, in fact, the presidential candidates with the most royal genes has won every single American election. Now, it seems as if Trump and Hillary had exactly the same lineage, so it didn't really matter which one of the two won. This information comes from Burke's Peerage, which is the Bible of aristocratic genealogy based in London. Every presidential election in America since and including George Washington in 1789 to Bill Clinton has been won by the candidate with the most British and French royal genes. Of the 42 presidents to Clinton, 33 have been related to two people, Alfred the Great, King of England, and Charlemagne, the most famous monarch of France. So it goes on. 19 of them are related to England's Edward III, and has 2,000 blood connections to Prince Charles. The same goes with the banking families in America. George Bush and Barbara Bush are from the same bloodline, the Pierce bloodline, which changed its name from Percy when it crossed the Atlantic. Percy is one of the aristocratic families of Britain to this day. They were involved in the gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament at the time of Guy Fawkes. Now that's even more fascinating, because that was a Jesuit plot to overthrow the Protestant government in the United States. So if all these bloodlines belong to these individuals that overthrew Protestantism, well, that would be an interesting plot for the puppet masters to work on behind the scenes. But we're just looking at the facts, so let's continue. The Mail online predicted or showed that The Simpsons predicted a Donald Trump presidency, and it didn't end well. Time travel episode from 2000 featured broke nation relied on aid from China. Now, as we have seen in some of the previous series that we have made, The Simpsons the writers of The Simpsons are all probably insider individuals with more knowledge about what is going to happen in the world than most would deem possible. And as some candidates have said in the past, if something works out the way that it has worked out, it works out that way because it was planned that way. So there is that element, but there is also, of course, an element of luck maybe involved as well. Now, The Simpsons generally use many esoteric symbols in their productions, and they have been extremely accurate on a number of issues and have predicted many things that seemed unlikely or impossible years in advance. 9/11 being a case in point, the destructive events in the United States, and in their particular little issues, 16 years before this presidential election, they showed their character in the same dress as Hillary Clinton would be wearing, including the necklace, including the earrings, and that's rather fascinating. It's interesting that she actually wins the next election, but according to their scenario, Donald Trump would win the current election. So that's rather fascinating, and some of the statements and the ideologies that were contrasted there are, well, very strange to say the least. This comes from the year 2000, and they show Trump in his red tie and his jacket between the flags, and this happened in reality. So they're pretty accurate. But it gets even more bizarre because they show that Trump, that's in 2000, greeting the people in Trump Towers, going down the escalator, raising his hand, and again he has the red tie and the suit on. And reality, 2015, Trump greeting the crowds, going down the escalator of Trump Towers. I mean, it's pretty accurate. It's pretty sharp. Now, whether this is pure coincidence or whether it is not is actually irrelevant. Some of the more bizarre ones, rather interesting, are the maps that we will see in a moment. And you can see their character here saying, oh no, it's actually come true. And this is the map that has been going around where they show what the distribution of the votes would be, but this is actually not quite accurate because this one was actually one that they used in the Romney campaign, so it doesn't apply to that previous one. But nevertheless, it's interesting that they show these red demographics, and of course this picture has changed in the present one, so you can not really use this one. Now let's have a look at some other facts, because what we are interested in is prophecy and not the games and the dialectics that are being played in this world. The National Catholic Reporter tells us that Mike Pence, who is going to be the Vice President of the United States, which is a very powerful figure, is a born-again evangelical Catholic. And the web pages in the world tell us this very thing. Now, that's somewhat of a misnomer, and a few years ago, that would not have been a possibility. To be a born-again evangelical Catholic would be considered an oxymoron. It would be impossible. In my youth, that would have been impossible. But the religious landscape has changed, and there's been such a merging of Catholicism and Protestantism that this contradiction in terms is today a common reality. So, a born-again evangelical Catholic. They say that he was a rather dedicated Catholic, Mike Pence. He was an altar boy and very dedicated. And what about Donald Trump? Well, Donald Trump attended an Ivy League school, so let's ask the Washington Post something about his background. When he was young, he went to the private Kew Forest School in Forest Hills, Queens, where his father, Frederick, a very wealthy real estate developer, was on the governing board. Behavior problems led Donald's exit from the school, at which point he was sent to New York Military Academy at the age of 13 by his parents, and who hoped the discipline of the school would channel his energy in a positive manner. He did well there and went to Fordham University, a Jesuit school in the Bronx. So Donald Trump tries to downplay his Fordham experience and rather to upplay his later experiences. And then he went to the University of Pennsylvania and studied economics for 2 years. So he did attend a Jesuit school, which is interesting and just one of the facts. Now let's go back to Mike Pence again. Postmodern evangelical Catholic conservative. But Pence is also very much a creation of the last half century of American political religious life. Born and raised Catholic, he became a Catholic youth minister and reportedly wanted to be a priest. But according to interviews, Pence has given over the years, interestingly, has more recently declined to talk specifically about his spiritual evolution. While in college from 1978 to 81, he began blending his Catholicism with evangelical Protestantism. I made a commitment to Christ, Pence said. I'm a born-again evangelical Catholic. So here we have a Catholic vice president who is in a position to reach out to evangelicals. Now it's fascinating that the other side, of course, had chosen Tim Kaine as their vice president. And the two met in debate, and apparently Mike Pence was the stronger candidate in that debate, or so they say. But nevertheless would have made any difference because both of these are Catholic gentlemen. And let's have a look what the Harvard Divinity School tells us about Tim Kaine and Mike Pence and faith. It says that Kaine was educated at a Jesuit high school and has been influenced throughout his life by Jesuits. Often seen as progressive and open-minded in the US, he's also been called a Pope Francis Catholic. What does it mean to be a liberal Catholic reformer? Now, this is rather fascinating. So you have these high-profile Catholics as vice presidents, the one wanting to be a priest and was an altar boy, and the other one, all his training in Jesuit environments. Now, it's interesting that the Jesuits themselves say, or Ignatius Loyola said, that if you have to choose sides, then a Jesuit can choose one side and represent it to the point of death, while a fellow Jesuit may choose the opposite side and defend that to the point of death. That is the Hegelian dialectic, and it's fascinating how it works. So it really wouldn't have mattered which one of these two would have become the vice president, and it really wouldn't have mattered which one of these two would have become president. Now, before I even talked about this, I thought that Hillary Clinton would probably fit the modern profile somewhat better, but I also said it doesn't matter which one of them wins. But now on reflection, it becomes rather interesting that it went the way it went. Now, in the discussion here with these people from Harvard, Donald Trump's running mate, Governor Mike Pence, described himself as a born-again evangelical Catholic. Is this an unusual faith mix? And what does this combination say about his public service? And the answer? I'm not quite sure what Governor Pence intends to affirm by a born-again evangelical Catholic. He comes from an Irish Catholic background, was raised as such during college, Indiana Hanover College. He had an evangelical religious experience under the influence of a non-denominational group. However, in the following years, he still considered himself a Catholic, went to Mass, worked as a youth minister at a Catholic church, and even thought of becoming a priest. However, in the mid-1990s, he joined the Grace Evangelical Church, which is affiliated with the Evangelical Free Church in America. One could describe it as a Baptist denomination. It was, however, the church to which he started to take his family in Indianapolis. At that time, he described himself as a Christian, conservative, Republican, in that order. In this description, the word Catholic was not present. So, when we look at these two, they are both capable of fulfilling the prophetic agenda. Pope Francis calls for unity between evangelicals, Catholics, and he said that division is the work of the devil. So they had to be brought together. So Pence is actually the perfect one, because he is both Catholic and evangelical and can bring them together. Pope Francis has called for unity amongst evangelicals, Catholics, and Christians from other denominations, emphasizing that we are one in Christ and warning that division between the groups is the work of the devil. Division is the work of the father of lies, the father of discord, who does everything possible to keep us divided, Francis said in a video message to a gathering sponsored by the John 17 movement. Now, the John 17 movement was a movement to gather all the evangelicals under one umbrella, under the papacy, or together with the papacy. Charisma News gives a very interesting insight. It tells us that Kenneth Copeland laid hands on Donald Trump and prayed over him. This is fascinating. Well, Charisma News is a very prominent journal. Earlier this month, we reported how Paula White set up an invitation-only meeting between the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and evangelical pastors. That meeting happened this week, and plenty of Pentecostals were there to lay hands on the billionaire, make declarations of his life, and pray. Beyond Paula White, also present were Kenneth and Gloria Copeland, and then another whole host of very prominent evangelical leaders. Where is this heading towards? Are we heading towards a union of church and state? Now, what is Donald Trump? Well, let's have a look. Religious News Services says, is Donald Trump now a born-again Christian? And when I read what the journal Christianity Today had to say about Donald Trump, about his remarks and his anti-woman statements and his wild statements, then they were, well, less than pleased, it seems. And now, afterwards, they're all scattering and trying to come together on these issues. Donald Trump has described himself as a Presbyterian and Protestant, a Sunday church person, which is very fascinating, and a collector of Bibles. Now, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee reportedly can add born-again Christian to that list too, according to one of the members of Trump's new Evangelical Advisory Board. So here you have a Sunday-keeping Protestant. Now, if you're going to reach out to the religious community and bring them together, wouldn't it be interesting if the Protestant reaches out to the Catholics And the Catholics reaches out to the Protestants. Then you would have a perfect mix. But I found this rather interesting, and an interesting mix, because by some of his statements, it is hard to imagine that all of this is, perfect truth. Now, this was the statement that Donald Trump made to the Catholic world.
Catholics are an important part of the American story. America has been strengthened by hardworking Catholics. From New York to California, the Catholic story is truly unique, and it's a great story. From marching for civil rights to educating millions of children, serving the poor, and helping define the pro-life movement, clergy and lay Catholics across the country have made countless contributions to the American success and the American success story. Washington politicians have been hostile to the church. They have been hostile to Catholics. They have been hostile to the members of Catholicism. My administration will stand side by side with the American Catholics to promote the values we all share as Christians and Americans. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. We will make America great again.
So there you have Donald Trump reaching out to the Catholic community. A Protestant, born again Protestant. And on the other hand, you have Mike Pence, who said, I'm a Christian, conservative, and Republican in that order, and left out the little fact that he was thoroughly Catholic. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Greetings, I'm Governor Mike Pence. It's my honor this year to serve as the Republican nominee for Vice President of the United States with my running mate, Donald Trump. I'm grateful to be able to join you, if only by videotape, but I'm not sure how they introduce me. The introduction I prefer is pretty short. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. And really, it's as a fellow believer that I'm particularly honored to be able to address you today. I know every one of us has our own story about how we came to faith. For me, I was raised in a family where faith was important. Church on Sunday, grace before dinner. But my faith became my own when I made a personal decision to trust Jesus Christ during the spring of my freshman year in college. That night, my heart was literally broken wide, with gratitude and with joy, when I came to realize that what happened on the cross, in some small measure, actually happened for me. And I know all of you in the room share that same passion and that same sense of gratitude for what was done on our behalf. Years later, my faith has been tested, relied on more times than I could possibly count. All I know for sure today is I need him more than ever. And he's really the center of my life and the center of my family's life. God's love really eclipses our failings, and as always, he's been a source of renewal and strengthening for this nation and for people of faith throughout our history. In these troubled times, I believe we stand at a turning point, when those who cherish faith, those who cherish freedom, those who cherish the sanctity of life and all the liberties enshrined in our Constitution should step forward and heed the call to action. I joined Donald Trump on the Republican ticket because I believe he has the right leadership and the right vision to make America great again. President Donald Trump will appoint justices to the Supreme Court who will uphold our Constitution and the rights of the unborn. Donald Trump will also sign into law legislation that will free up the voices of faith all across this country by repealing what's come to be known as the Johnson Amendment. The Johnson Amendment's literally been on the books since the 1950s, and it essentially threatens tax-exempt organizations and churches with losing their tax status if they speak out on important issues facing the nation from the pulpit. Donald Trump and I are both committed to work with renewed Republican majorities in the House and the Senate to repeal the Johnson Amendment once and for all. The truth is that a careful study of American history has shown that the strength of our nation has come from our communities of faith. Throughout our history, it's been the voices of faith that more often than not have driven our nation to a more perfect union. It was the pulpits around the American founding that thundered against the tyranny of King George. It was the pulpits around America that spoke of the evils of slavery and brought an end to the scourge of slavery in America, even through a great civil conflict. And it was voices of faith and communities of faith that transformed our nation through the civil rights movement in our own lifetime, and we're a better nation for it. The choice today for all of us, though, could not be more clear. I've never seen a more dramatic choice in a national election in my lifetime. I truly do believe we're come to a time for choosing. And I think it's a time in the life of our nation when people who cherish life, when people who cherish our liberties, when people who cherish the great traditions that are enshrined in our Constitution should come together and support Donald Trump and our agenda to make America great again. In these troubled times at home and abroad, challenging times for American families, I'd like to encourage you to do one more thing, and that is to bow the head and bend the knee in the days that remain in this election. Pray for our country. But as you do so, please pray as Lincoln said was his prayer. Not so much that God would be on our side, but that we would be, in his words, on God's side. Because I truly do believe in my heart of hearts that what's been true for millennia is still true today. That if his people, who are called by his name, will humble themselves and pray, he'll again do as he's always done throughout the storied history of this nation. He'll hear from heaven, and he'll heal our land. This one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you today. May God bless you, your families, this community of faith, your church, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Would a speech like that make the pendulum swing to the other side? I think it could. Now, what if there was a catch to it that nobody can really see? They can only see the negatives and the legacy of liberalism at the present time and the disasters that go along with it. And here is this hope of the pendulum swinging to the other side and embracing this promise of a healed land and a healed society. But what if it has an arrow embedded in it? A new America. You heard him say that Trump was going to repeal the Johnson Amendment that muzzles pastors. During his acceptance speech, Trump thanked the evangelical community for their support, adding, "You have so much to contribute to our politics, yet our laws prevent you from speaking your minds from your own pulpits. An amendment pushed by Lyndon Johnson many years ago threatens religious institutions with the loss of their tax-exempt status if they openly advocate their political views. I'm going to work very hard to repeal that language and protect free speech for all Americans." Let me take you back to the beginning of this little talk. What did JFK say? I believe in an America where no pope and no Protestant prelate will tell the parishioners how to vote. And here we have a man who is saying that he will rescind the clause that makes it impossible for them to do so. Isn't this church and state coming together? Isn't this the clergy dictating to the parishioners views that will ensconce the values of Christianity? Now, if the values of Christianity were upheld, that would be a marvelous thing. But what if there were certain laws in that package that were actually laws of the first beast, that the Protestant world had identified as Antichrist, and that these laws, when enacted, would negate the law of God? And the Bible says they have done away with your laws, and it is time for you to act. I think we are living in very interesting times. Now, the journal Politico says Trump Evangelical Advisory Board features Bachman and Jerry Falwell. So he has an advisory board that is going to advise him on policy. Now, what did JFK say? Where no Protestant prelate will tell the President of the United States what he should do, and no Pope. And now we have a mixture of the two doing exactly that. Now, will it favor the first beast, Catholicism? Let's have a look. Well, here is the full list of the board members as shared by the campaign. Now, we won't go through all of them, just highlight one or two of them and see where this leads us. There's Michelle Bachmann, former congresswoman, and there's Bernard, senior pastor and CEO of Christian Cultural Center. There's Mark Burns, Tim Clinton, and then there's Kenneth and Gloria Copeland. Now, these are very interesting people that have made some fascinating statements in the past, which are mind-boggling when you compare them with what the Bible has to say. And you have James Dobson, author, psychologist, and host of My Family Talk. Jerry Falwell, president of Liberty University. You had Ronnie Floyd and Jack Graham and many others. And you have Robert Jeffries and Davis Jeremiah and Richard Land and James MacDonald and Johnny Moore and Robert Morris. This is the full team. James Robinson, founder of Life Outreach International. Tony Suarez, Executive Vice President, National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. Jack Strag, Paula White, Tom Winters, Celia Yates. I mean, this is fascinating. And what did Donald Trump say about these people? He said, I have tremendous respect and admiration for this group, and I look forward to continuing to talk about the issues important to evangelicals and all Americans, and the common sense solutions I will implement when I am president. Donald Trump said of his list that included former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Now, let's have a look at just one or two on that list. In 2014, a group of evangelicals was taken to the Vatican by Tony Palmer, who is now deceased, and there they were to embrace each other so that the evangelicals and the Catholics could come together again. It was on that occasion, or just prior to that, where the Pope had sent a message to Kenneth Copeland, and Kenneth Copeland had blessed the Pope while speaking in tongues. And there were many other evangelical leaders there that also embraced the papal message that was sent to them. Pope Francis met televangelist Kenneth Copeland and James Robinson. Now, both of those are on the list. So this is rather fascinating. These people went to Rome to discuss the reunification, and this event is going to be very prominent and public in the year 2017, when the Lutheran world celebrates its 500th centennial of the Protestant Reformation. So these are the issues of the day. The Christian Post says megachurch pastor Jack Graham ready to champion Donald Trump after meeting with 900 evangelicals. Now, he's also one of those that went to the Pope. Former Southern Baptist Convention president and megachurch pastor Jack Graham says that he is ready to champion Donald Trump after attending the meeting between the presumptive Republican nominee and over 900 evangelical pastors and activists in New York City on Tuesday. These people are, on the one hand, now the advisors to the president, and to bring about this change, this making America great again. And on the other hand, they are the ones who are negotiating with the papacy for reunification.
In fact, that is exactly what Donald Trump vowed to do. Donald Trump vowed to close the gap between church and state, according to Time. And it states that the GOP presidential nominee has tripled down with one base of political support that has steadfastly remained with him. white evangelical voters by promising to dismantle the laws that separate church and state in America. Now, it's fascinating what he said on the issue. And if you look what happened to religion, if you look at what's happening to Christianity, and you look at the number of people going to the churches, and the evangelicals know this also, it's not on this kind of climb, it's on this kind of a climb of slow and steady in the wrong direction, Trump said. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you've been silenced. You've been silenced like a child has been silenced. You have a chance to do something that will be earth-shaking, he said. I literally mean it, earth-shaking. You've got to get your people out to vote. Now, if this is what Donald Trump promised, then he is promising precisely what the Bible said would happen. An earth-shaking event that will induce God to intervene in human affairs.
It's interesting that both Donald Trump and Pence said that they cherished the Sunday because that was part of their heritage and that is what they remember of their childhood. Now, the Lord's Day Alliance in the Boston Globe said the following: the Lord's Day Alliance, founded by 6 major Protestant denominations in 1888, I find these dates so fascinating, spent a century fighting to force industrialists to give workers time to attend religious services and later to protect the blue laws. Those are the ones that bring in Sunday legislation. But little by little, drinking, sporting, shopping became permissible on Sundays. In the last 20 or so years, the group has shifted to advocating to an internal recognition of the Sabbath. The point is, where can a stressed out society find regeneration and renewal? Said Reverend Rodney Peterson, executive director of the group, who drew dozens of people to an interfaith conference on Sabbath observance last week at the Old South Church in Copley Square. So this was reported in the Boston Globe on November the 2nd, 2016. This is an evangelical agenda to bring Sunday back into the mainstream again. And here we have candidates, I believe, that are in a position and have the power base to do it. Because for the first time, Republicans control both houses. This is one of the most powerful presidents that the United States has ever had. And if ever there was an opportunity to bring about the prophetic scenario, it is now. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying it is possible for it to happen. Revelation 13 verse 15 says, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, and that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Is this the time in which this prophecy will be fulfilled? Only time will tell.
Welcome to the behind-the-scenes conversation about the unseen realm. I'm here with Dr. Mike Heiser and Dr. Ben Witherington III, and we're going to talk a little bit about the practical implications about learning about the unseen realm. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
So you guys have been Bible scholars for decades. Dr. Heiser, Old Testament is your field. Dr. Witherington, New Testament is your field.
Yep.
Before we go any further, I want to answer the question, what is a Bible scholar, and how is that different from a pastor?
Well, it's a lot more education for a start. I mean, most pastors will have had some seminary training or at least detailed Bible college training. To be an Old or New Testament scholar in America, you would have to do a master's degree of 2 or 3 years, and then you would have had to do about a 5-year or more program in a PhD program, because the American PhD system involves coursework, comprehensive exams, and then if you're not dead after that, a thesis. And the thesis usually takes about 3 years.
And a thesis is basically a big book that you're writing.
Correct.
Yeah?
Correct.
Dr. Heiser, what does a Bible scholar do?
Well, typically, if you have a university or a seminary appointment, you have a job at one of those, you're going to be teaching courses. You might be, depending on the institution, you might have some undergrad, you might have graduate students.
Reason for titling it like that. Now, I've titled this little talk all together now, 1, 2, 3. And there's a reason for titling it like that, because Babylon consists of 3 components. There's the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. And they will come together at the end of time and inaugurate that which is the counterfeit of what God has initiated. But there are other aspects of the 3 as well. You see, the devil is a counterfeiter, but he's also the master of reversal. He likes to reverse everything that God has put in place, and reverse it so brilliantly that it looks like righteousness, when in actual fact it is an abomination. And the number 3 is very important, because God is described as 3 persons in the Bible, and the devil has his counterfeit. You have the dragon, which represents the Father. You have the beast, which represents the Son. And you have the false prophet, which represents the Holy Spirit. And then there are also political aspects that come in 3. So I want to start right from the beginning. And I know I'm going to be in trouble, but that's okay. I'm always in trouble. I'm used to it. Genesis 1, verse 27. And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he them, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every green tree that thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. So there are a few things that God inaugurated in Eden. Firstly, he created them male and female. But the rules and the covenant were transferred to Adam before Eve was even there. Adam received dominion before Eve was even created. He gave names to all the animals. And the covenant was with man and was to be transferred to everything that is in the sphere of power that God had created. And the woman was flesh of his flesh and bone of his bone. They were to be as one, but there was a hierarchy. In Genesis chapter 8, verse 18, And Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him. And I like the way Randy Skeet explained this situation. When it came to the redemption in the ark, the wives are mentioned as many times as the men are mentioned. But when it comes to the covenant, it is always with the men. And what he did before the flood, he repeated after the flood. Genesis 9 verse 1, And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. It doesn't say there with Noah and his son and his wives. They were there by implication because they were bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. But the covenant was something that was handed down in a hierarchical system that God had set up. And it was called a patriarchal system, and it's not very favorably viewed in the days that we live in. Now, it wasn't because the women were not capable. It wasn't that they weren't spiritual enough. None of those criteria mattered. It was simply a hierarchy that God had set in place, as he has with the angelic host as well. And even in the Godhead, there's God the Father, there's God the Son, and then you had various categories of angels. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 3 said, I but would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. So there is a hierarchy in the Bible. And if we go to Genesis, God established his covenant through the man, and he gave dominion, and the earth was subject to man. And he created them male and female, and he said that through this union he would share his creative capacity with humanity. Now, there was something else that was also instituted in Eden. Genesis chapter 2 verse 24, Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So the marriage union, the covenant, the earth, dominion over the earth, and the Sabbath, all were instituted in Eden. And they set the tone for the entire existence of mankind. Now, do you think that the devil would hate everything that was instituted in Eden? And as the master of reversal, he would want to take the whole plan and reverse it and set it up in a different fashion. And before he can set up his kingdom, he must be able to do this. And it must incorporate not only the physical aspects, it must incorporate also the spiritual aspects. Because his kingdom is not only a physical, it's also a spiritual kingdom. So, if God instituted the marriage, and God instituted dominion over the earth, and when all these things had been done, he instituted the Sabbath of rest, to rest in the completed works of God. In other words, the Sabbath really stands for righteousness by faith, because there's nothing I can add to the creation, and there's nothing I can add to the eventual recreation after the fall of man. It's a complete work that God did and not man. So the Sabbath becomes the symbol of rest. So what God has instituted, Satan will want to negate. He will want to negate the dominion. He will want to negate the institution of marriage. He will want to negate the Sabbath. And then he will have set up a kingdom in counterfeit to this kingdom. Now in Daniel, we read about the kingdoms as they will arise upon the earth. And each kingdom had its opportunity and then was replaced by another kingdom. I've had this statue modified slightly, because whenever you look at the statue in the books, he's always standing with his legs nicely together. And I didn't like that, so I had one made where you spread the legs. Because one of the feet is sitting in Rome, but if you go to the Roman Empire, it also had a seat in the east, in Constantinople. And this kingdom is a universal kingdom, so it saddles the whole earth. And is firmly entrenched not only in the east, but also in the west. But in the 10 toes are epitomized the Roman Empire in its western form, which will eventually control through its norms and its standards the entire world. Now, who came out of that Western European empire? Is it just Europe? Or is it the countries associated with Europe? What about the United States of America? Isn't it settled largely with Europeans, or wasn't it originally when the constitutions were framed? What about Southern Africa? What about Australia and New Zealand? So that's the one aspect, and then you have the other aspect, the eastern component. And the feet are made of iron and clay. Now, if we read in the Spirit of Prophecy, it says there, iron and clay is the mingling of churchcraft and statecraft. We have to read this carefully. We've come to a time when God's sacred work is represented by the feet of the image in which the iron was mixed with the miry clay. God has a people, a chosen people, whose discernment must be sanctified, who must not become unholy by laying upon the foundation wood, hay, and stubble. So there's something that we have to do that's different to what the world does. Every soul who is loyal to the commandments of God will see that the distinguishing feature of our faith is the seventh-day Sabbath. If the government would honor the Sabbath as God has commanded, it would stand in the strength of God in defense of the faith once delivered to the saints. But statesmen will uphold the spurious Sabbath and will mingle their religious faith with the observance of this child of the papacy, placing it above the Sabbath which the Lord has sanctified and blessed, setting it apart for man to keep holy, as a sign between him and his people to 1,000 generations. The mingling of churchcraft and statecraft is represented by the iron and the clay. Now, so often we want to say that the clay are the weak elements of the political systems and the iron are the strong parts, but this is not what the Bible really teaches, nor what the Spirit of Prophecy says. The clay is churchcraft, the iron is statecraft, and the two are constantly trying to work together to set up a counterfeit kingdom, but they will not cleave, except for a brief moment at the end when everybody gives their power unto the system. This investing the church with the power of the state will bring evil results. Men have almost passed the point of God's forbearance. They have invested their strength in politics and have united with the papacy. But the time will come when God will punish those who have made void his law, and their evil work will recoil upon themselves. So how close are we to this togetherness, this final push? And what is the ideology that will finally bring it about? Well, in the book Education we read, at the same time anarchy is seeking to sweep away all law, not only divine but human. The centralizing of wealth and power, one aspect. The vast combinations for the enriching of the few at the expense of the many. The combination of the poorer classes for the defense of their interests and claims. The spirit of unrest, of riot and bloodshed. The worldwide dissemination, and this is interesting, of the same teachings that led to the French Revolution are all tending to involve the whole world in a struggle similar to that which convulsed France. Now, do we have all of these in the world today? Do we have the centralization of wealth and power? Yes. But who did the wealth and power centralization? Do we have combinations for the enriching of the few against the many? Yes. Do we have combinations of poorer classes to defend their interests in the form of trade unions, etc.? Yes, we do. Do we have a spirit of unrest? You only have to look at the news. Do we have riots? Do we have bloodshed? And do we have the same teachings as we had during the French Revolution? And the answer is yes, to every single one of them. In fact, Condoleezza Rice said that even the Bush administration's main task was to complete the work of the French Revolution. Now, we're living in a cataclysmic time. Now, whether these are acts of demonic powers or whether these are planned is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that a Hegelian dialectic is being used to channel the mindset of man in a particular direction. As the Masonic fraternity says, ordo ab chaos. Out of the chaos, you create the order that you want. But in order to get people to have the same mindset, you must first channel them through the chaos. So it's not only in the Western world that we see catastrophes, we see it in the Eastern world as well. Bombing that killed more than 200, deadliest attack in Baghdad in years. People have no morality left, no feeling for humanity. Life is meaningless. People will kill for anything. Just this week, 84 killed in France after the truck plows through the crowd celebrating Bastille Day. I found that rather fascinating, that it was on Bastille Day when this happened, and it celebrates, of course, the French Revolution. And what about the killings of all those people that attended the concert in France just a short while before this latest catastrophe? Band playing Kiss the Devil at Paris terrorist attack. Eagles of Death metal addresses tragedy for the first time. So while they was playing the Eagles of Death, this song, Kiss the Devil, the gunmen plowed down some of the guests. Orlando gay nightclub shooting, 50 killed. Suspect is Omar Mateen. And the world is in turmoil. It doesn't know which way to turn. Some people say, are these the judgments of God? Some people are saying, is this the world gone mad? Religious protesters result in the band Rotting Christ changing their name for their South African gig, which took place this month. This band travels the world, and they are on an international tour to make sure that everybody understands whose side they're on. Now, the very name was so repulsive that they had to change it for the South African gigs. But their name is Rotting Christ. What does that say? It's a Greek band, and what they are saying is that Christ was never resurrected. This is wishful thinking by the devil. And every person who watches the media and sees what is going on must realize that the world cannot continue as it continues. And everybody wants a way out. We want a way out of gender violence. We want a way out of racial violence. We want a way out of religious violence. Can't we just come together and stop this insanity? And the greater the insanity, the greater the need to come together. Isn't this exactly what the devil wants to? Isn't this a brilliant plot? If you look at this picture on one of their albums of these terrible demonic figures, and they have the words there, kataton, aimona, whatever, meaning literally to follow your own demon. In other words, to follow the spirit that leads you, the demonic force that leads you. The world is heading towards a precipice, and these obscene activities taking place in the world, and this senseless violence is channeling the thinking Christian, religious, whatever religion, minded person in a particular direction. And that direction is unity. So we have to come together. We have to stop this insanity. And when those policemen were killed in the United States, Obama defends the Black Lives Matter protests at Police Memorial in Dallas. And some people criticized him and said he spurned the fire, and he actually supported some of the violence in this way. So he was heavily criticized, but the matter is, in fact, in the media, there is racial divide, not only in the United States of America, but in every nation on this planet. And the media says it fell to former President George W. Bush, a resident of Dallas, to provide a less political message that focused on unifying the country out of grief. And I'm surprised at his speech, because he was not so well known for his oratory skills, but he did something quite marvelous here. Mr. Bush said the nation is proud of the slain officers, and then he praised them for their duties that they had done. And then he said, referring to racial divisions roiling the country, Mr. Bush said, Americans must work at finding our better selves. Too often we judge other groups by their worst examples while judging ourselves by our best intentions. Mr. Bush said, at our best, we know we have one country, one future, one destiny. We recognize that we are brothers and sisters sharing the same brief moment on earth. We do not want the unity of grief, nor do we want the unity of fear. We want the unity of hope, affection, and high purpose. I think it's a good speech. I think every person on this planet longs for this high purpose. People are sick and tired of violence. They're sick and tired of fear. They're sick and tired of grief. Obama gay marriage legacy. White House lit up with rainbow after same-sex marriage ruling. So the nation celebrated when he brought in this ruling, and the cartoonists had quite a bit of fun. They said, well, if you look at the legacy of JFK, then it was one small step for man, pointing to the moon landing and what he had achieved in his tenure. And Obama, they have one giant leap for mankind, where they have the transvestite sneaking out of the woman's restroom. And they ask, is this the legacy? Well, what did this legislation actually do? Which legislation did it negate? It negated what God had put in place in Eden. So God had said, He created them, male and female. They shall become one flesh. The man shall cleave unto his wife. And this was a covenant before God. This has been reduced to a judicial agreement which can be annulled at any time. The South African courts actually went further and ensured that there could be no recourse in the case of a divorce against one or the other party, because everybody is totally free to choose whomsoever they wish. Now, in the past, if someone destroyed your marriage and you had tremendous financial implications, you could sue the other party. No longer, because it is only a legal agreement in the context of a material sense for the time in which they are together. It's no longer a binding contract before God. So the marriage has been annulled via this legislation. Now, this happened in the United States and in most other countries as well. But this person says, why Obama will go down as one of the greatest presidents of all times. So this is a news commentator. And he has some interesting things to say. It's saying, it may be hard to imagine now, but in the face of rising chaos, we'll crave unity all the more. And in future years, whoever can speak most convincingly of unity will rise to the top. It's also hard to imagine many beating Obama at the game. This year's carnival election with Trump as a kind of debauched circus barker only makes the distinction clearer. The absurdity and car crash spectacle of it all have already lent Obama an out and out of time quality, as if he were a creature from another loftier century. Whatever happens next, I feel this is in my bones. We'll look back at history, hopefully when we're zooming down the Barack Obama Hyperloop transport system, and think, that man was rare, and we were damn lucky to have him. Interesting statement. The Jesuit Père Teilhard de Chardin said, driven by the forces of love, the fragments of the world seek each other so that the world may come to be. So you first fragment the world with chaos and disorder, and then you pick up the fragments in people who crave nothing more than unity. He also said the outcome of the world, the gates of the future, the entry into the superhuman, these are not thrown open to a few of the privileged, nor to one chosen people to the exclusion of all others. They will open only to an advance of all together, in a direction in which all together can join and find completion in a spiritual renovation of the earth. The world has to come together. This chaos has to stop. This pain, this grief has to end. And then you have these two interesting characters, sparring continuously in the media, vying for the most powerful position in the political sphere. And they don't have very nice things to say about each other, but of course they are actually friends. They visit each other at their homes, they play golf together, they party together, they laugh together. They're house friends. You can look it up on the web. It's very interesting. There are many, many pictures. But there's an interesting contrast that is being portrayed. The one contrast is, let's become inclusive, let's find space for one another, and let's take care of the marginalized. And the other one is, let's build walls, let's separate, let's, etc. And these two ideologies are facing each other squarely in this election. And then you have in the mix a man like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders heads to the Vatican for a conference. Sanders said in an interview with Associated Press that he was appreciative and proud to be invited to the conference organized by the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, and that he has long admired the teachings of Pope Francis. Now, Bernie Sanders is a Jew, but he likes Pope Francis. He will join several speakers commemorating the 25th anniversary of Centissimus Annus, a high-level teaching document by Pope John Paul II on the economy and social justice at the end of the Cold War. The theme from the conference, which is essentially how we create a moral economy, is one that has occupied my attention for decades, and the teachings from Pope Francis have moved me very much, said the senator. So the ideology that he wants to bring into government is a papal ideology of social justice, which in many lectures which I've given before have been shown to be totally contrary to every tenet of the Word of God. But this is what the world is crying out for, because there is so much social injustice. First you create it, and then you use it to get the iron and the clay to cleave together. Because if churchcraft and statecraft don't come together to do this together, the world will never see it. It's interesting that he kept on with his campaign even though he was far behind and could no longer win the presidential race. Yet he continued to the very last moment, and his reason that he gave was to make sure that the ideologies that he stood for would be implemented in the party, the Democratic Party, no matter who ran. And when that was accomplished, he finally endorsed Hillary Clinton. So Hillary Clinton is probably the best candidate for the next presidency of the United States. Although if the other one wins, it doesn't really matter, because they are cut from the same cloth, they're even from the same family, the same royal family, so they have the right bloodlines to be president, whether they are Trumps or whether they are Clintons. It doesn't really matter. But the ideology is important. And then we've seen some very interesting history which sort of shook many people's pockets, even small people's pockets, the so-called Brexit. And I heard so many of our own people saying, well, this is the final falling apart of the iron and the clay, and people are coming to their senses and moving away from the New World Order. But there's something wrong here, because prophecy says the kings of the world will give their power unto the beast. So what was Brexit all about? And why should Britain separate itself when Ireland does not separate itself, when Scotland wants to secede maybe and even go to the European Union? Why is it essential that Britain should be separate from the European Union? Well, I don't know if any of you have seen a previous video of mine called The Beamable Sustainable Princes, which deals with the history of Britain and the Reformation, and how eventually the Reformation capitulated to the papal power, and Britain is actually a crown territory, which means that it's subject legally, by documentation, to Rome and no one else. What does this mean? Well, let's have a look at the outgoing Prime Minister. Cameron's legacy. How will you remember him? We've looked at Obama's. David Hassel in Birmingham believes David Cameron will always be remembered first and foremost as the Prime Minister who held a referendum about Britain's membership in the EU. He'll be remembered as the Prime Minister who bet the future of the country on a referendum, the real aim of which was to sort out Eurosceptics within his own party. He lost that bet and as a result forced the country out of the EU, possibly leading to the eventual breakup of the UK itself. That's not a legacy to be proud of, says the media. Is it, or is it planned? What's the other legacy? Johnny Thompson in Cardiff believes David Cameron should be praised for introducing gay marriage. As the member of the lesbian, gay, etc. community, I'll always remember David Cameron as the Prime Minister who finally introduced gay marriage into the United Kingdom. His social policies in modernizing the Conservative Party and protecting vulnerable minority groups such as my own is a feature of his premiership which I hope is not forgotten. Mr. Cameron essentially made me proud not only to be British, but proud to be myself. That is invaluable. He writes, he legalized gay marriage, but it wasn't even in the Tory manifesto and against the wishes of many of his own MPs. Why is it so important that this legislation should be introduced in the entire world? Now, I'm not here to criticize anybody's lifestyle. I'm just here to state what God said. And God had a particular standard, And God had a particular way in which he distributed the roles. And here, this has been officially negated in the entire world. So the one aspect that was introduced in Eden has been done away with. The dominion will be done away with when it comes to the charter that has been signed with regard to climate change. Because their dominion is transferred from man over the environment to the environment over man. So that has been taken away with. What's the third aspect that must be taken away with? The Sabbath. Because the Sabbath is a symbol of rest in the completed works of Christ. This system is a system where man intercedes on behalf of man and takes over the role which God has, in a spiritual realm, assigned to mankind. Who runs the world? Women. Now, I'm on dangerous ground here, but it's just a fact that women are more and more prominent in politics in the world today. As Theresa May became Britain's Prime Minister Wednesday, the world is one step closer to being run by women. Well, only on the surface, because behind the scenes there are others who actually run the show. May joins German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who leads Europe's largest economy and has worked to unify the continent in the face of a multitude of recent global crises, as a woman governing a major European country. And if Hillary Clinton is elected president in November, 3 of the world's most influential nations would be run by women for the first time. In fact, the 10 toes that the Bible is concerned with will be run by women. Now, there's nothing wrong with a woman running it. There's nothing that suggests that a woman is not as capable as a man. That's not the point. The point is, it is a fulfillment of what the Bible says. So will 3 women run the world? Isaiah 3 verse 12, as for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err and destroy the way of thy paths. You know what? Men deserve that the women rule. Because men have usurped the position that has been given to them by God. Not to lord it over people, but to rule by compassion and kindness in the image of Christ. Husbands, love your wife, your wives. And love is not self-seeking, and it never seeks to harm anyone. And we're living in a planet that is lying in tatters. So God says, let the woman rule. Now, it's very interesting about this lady. May Day, time for amendment of life. Some changes have to come. The world cannot continue as it has. Why did they vote for Brexit? The Jesuits in Britain, their magazine, say, we have a deal, referring to the COP21 deal of the environment, where the environment takes precedent over man. Every single thing that God instituted in Eden is being negated. We're just waiting for the final one. The News Media writes, Christians may in particular think that Theresa May's family background, she is the daughter of a vicar, the same as Angela Merkel, will have given her a true understanding of what it is to serve. Church of England incumbents make a huge contribution to the well-being of everyone who lives in their parishes, not just those who attend church or profess the Christian faith. This is the real work of Christ, and it is this that Theresa May grew up witnessing day after day. Theresa May has also set her vision of reform, the success of which depends on the workings of the authoritative parliament that truly represents and serves the people. It is not entirely original. She is repeating the substance of what one of the greatest party chairmen said to a conservative conference, at a party and government set out to find a new agenda after de Gaulle vetoed Britain's application to join the European community. She echoes MacLeod when she says, "In Britain today, if you are born poor, you will die on average 9 years earlier than others. If you're black, you're treated more harshly by the criminal justice system than if you're white. If you're white, working class boy, you're less likely than anybody else to go to university. If you're at a state school, you're less likely to reach the top profession than if you're educated privately. If you're a woman, you still earn less than a man. If you suffer from mental health problems, there's too often not enough help to hand. If you're young, you'll find it harder than ever before to own your own home. These are all burning injustices, and I'm determined to fight against them." There are, of course, many things that Theresa May has said and done which Christians can disagree, but no Christian can disagree with this agenda. We know that Theresa May will not succeed on her own. We should pray that she is given the grace and strength of the Holy Spirit and implore the saints to come to her aid so that she might facilitate amendments of life in these islands. Question: do they want churchcraft and statecraft to come together to solve the problems of humanity, to straighten out the injustices that have been created in the first place in order to lead men into this dialectic thinking pattern? Well, what does the media say about the old Tory party? The media says, this is the Guardian, I mean, this is one of the biggest newspapers there. They say money is the only God the Tories want us to worship on a Sunday. There's no spirituality. Everything is just money, and the rich must get richer, and the poor can go and get poorer, and it doesn't matter, and these social injustices must continue. No, we need a rethink. Where must we go? Well, this is where we want to go. So why is Sunday special? The Christian answer is more complicated than expected. Every Christian moved their day of rest. The early Christians moved their day of rest from the seventh day of the week to the first day, from Saturday to Sunday, despite the fourth commandment mandating Saturday. Isn't this interesting? I.e., the seventh day Sabbath observance. This move was partly a way of honoring the resurrection which happened on the first day of the week, partly about distinguishing Christianity from Judaism, and partly a way of colonizing the posh Roman sun-worshipping day. So they've got the history straight. But it also conveniently distanced Christianity and its new imperial friends from all that dangerously redistributive stuff about the Jubilee, to which the Sabbath is fundamentally connected, for the seventh day of the week corresponds to the seventh day of creation when God rested. From this derives rest on the seventh day, one, rest for the land on the seventh year. We just discussed this. This is interesting. Which on the Jewish calendar is this year, and 3, the forgiveness of all debt, the Jubilee on the seventh year. When is the greatest Jubilee year in the history of the modern world going to take place? Next year, 2017. What did the Pope call this year? A special year of mercy, when the door of mercy will be open for everyone to accept this mercy so that we can go into the Jubilee. Is the world being prepared for something very particular? We just asked the questions in the lessons that we studied. Is this our duty to set these things right in a materialistic sense? Where are we going? This is how the world thinks. The stories you need to read in one handy email, read more. This last is the big one, the so-called year of the Lord's favor. It's what the Jubilee debt campaign referred back to when it called for the eradication of developing world debt. It's also what Jesus refers to in his very first sermon. I come to bring good news to the poor, freedom to the captive. Now you are literalizing spiritual words of Christ. This is a Jesuit application of a spiritual directive which God has given. I come to bring good news to the poor, freedom to the captive, and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. This is not some niche bit of scripture. It's the key that unlocks the whole meaning of the Jesus movement. And it is fundamentally and unavoidably antithetical to modern capitalism. It has to go the way we've been doing business has to go. The Jubilee is not debt restructuring. It's out and out full on debt forgiveness. No wonder the business minister isn't so keen. We need a new form of government. We need new thinking. Maybe the women can do it. Washington, D.C. Do we have the same thinking in Washington? Did you know that Washington, D.C., the City of London, and the Vatican are not just capitals or in capitals, they are sovereign nations, totally independent sovereign nations. Now, I have a whole lecture on that, the Beamable Sustainable Princes. All three of them, of course, have a territory. All three of them have a particular duty. All three of them have similar structures. The City of London has the obelisk. The Washington Monument is the obelisk, and the Vatican has its obelisk. All three of them are totally independent cities. All three of them have a particular geographical area, a city-state, independent city-state with its own laws, its own constitutions, its own police force. In the case of the Vatican, it's the Swiss Guard, which, by the way, is also a representative of the banking system, and its own flag. When it comes to the City of London, the heart of the City of London, then it has its own coat of arms, and it has its own geographical area with its own elections and its own bylaws, an independent city-state, and its own flag. And the dragons and we serve and all of these things are rather fascinating when you look at that history, but that's not part of this lecture. So this is called the Corporation of London. Like Vatican City, London's financial district is also a privately owned corporation or city-state located right smack in the heart of Greater London. It became a sovereign state in 1694 when King William III of Orange privatized and turned the Bank of England over to the bankers. And maybe it needs a king. Maybe it needs a King William. I wonder. Would be interesting if it could get a King William. Let's have a look what Wikipedia says about London Corporation. City of London Corporation. The City of London Corporation, officially and legally the mayor and commonalty and citizens of the City of London, is the municipal governing body of the City of London, the historic centre of London, and the location of much of the UK's financial sector. The Rothschild banks are there, and Rothschild stands for Red Shield, Rothschild, Red Shield. And if you look at the Jewish Encyclopedia, it says Vatican bankers. In 2006, the name was changed from Corporation of London to avoid confusion with the wider London local government. It's a totally separate government, the Greater London Authority. The corporation is probably the world's oldest continuous elected local government authority. Both businesses and residents of the city, or square mile as it's called, are entitled to vote in the elections, and in addition to its functions as the local authority analogous to those undertaken by the boroughs that administer the rest of London, it takes responsibility for supporting the financial services, industry, and representing its interests. And it has a Lord Mayor, a court, and a council, and all of the necessary components to make it an independent state. Now it's interesting that the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, was pro-Brexit. And David Cameron was anti-Brexit. And we're wondering, are they cleaving to each other? Are they not cleaving to each other? It has nothing to do with this. Because the cleaving has to do with churchcraft and statecraft. And why is it necessary that Britain should actually be separate? And why would Boris Johnson be in the know? Well, as a leading figure in an independent state, as the former mayor, and as a Bilderberger, he should know what the agenda is, the Bilderbergers having been created by the Jesuits, by Joseph Hieronym Rettinger. And why was he pro-Brexit? Does the New World Order need a separate state as a figurehead state, as Prince Charles was supposed to be? And then he was made the Foreign Secretary by the new Prime Minister. And as Secretary, as Foreign Secretary, he wields a tremendous amount of power because he will be dealing on a one-to-one basis with the great powers of the world, including the Russians and the Chinese and all of these. And who is the new Lord Mayor who's taken his place? Well, this is the official government webpage. Mayor of London, the role of the Executive London Strategic Authority is to promote economic development and wealth creation, social development, and the improvement of the environment. The mayor also has various other duties in relations to culture and tourism, and now it is Sadiq Khan, who happens to be a Muslim. And it's interesting, if you get to the 32nd degree in Freemasonry, well, then you become a Shriner Freemason, if that is your portfolio, and then you swear allegiance, not on the Bible, but on the Quran. And you don a fez, which says Allah. Rumors have emerged Britain's Queen Elizabeth is set to retire, so says the media, and intends to pass the crown over to Prince William and Kate Middleton. Britain's Queen Elizabeth, who just celebrated, etc., the reigning monarch, she wants to hand over directly to her grandson, Prince William. It's interesting that the Prince of Orange, William III, actually created this independent state, which is really subject to the crown. And the crown, legally, is the Vatican, and not Britain. The Queen owns no crown. She is subject to the crown. The news came from reports the Queen had made it known she was planning to step down and skip over her son, Prince Charles, turning over the crown to the second in line to the throne, his son, Prince William. Now, in the higher circles, it has always been stated that the British royalty should become a figurehead royalty for the entire world. And maybe it has to be separate from the other nations in order to fulfill that role. In fact, they would make a very nice couple and a very nice example to the world to look up to this youthful new endeavor of church and state working together. Now, the third little state is the District of Columbia in the United States. It also has its own territory within Washington, the District of Columbia. It has its own police force. It has its own flag, and there are 3 stars on the flag. All together now. 1, 2, 3. You see, the District of Columbia is the political powerhouse of this new order. The Vatican is the religious powerhouse, and it wields the sword of the Spirit, to which the sword of the state is subject. And here lies the military and political clout of the system. London is the powerhouse of the economic system. So all the economics of the world are controlled by an independent corporation in London that is subject to the Jesuits. And this one is also subject to the Jesuits. In fact, you will see that it has been donated from Jesuit land, which is Maryland, and the whole seat of government is totally legally separate from the United States. And the territory is what is called the DC Mall. And here's an aerial photograph where you have the great Obelix and the buildings associated with it, like the Capitol over there. And this is from Wikipedia, and it's called the mall. So when great gatherings take place at the mall, then it's not just a United States gathering. It is the gathering of the elites that pull the strings of government. Now, what great meeting is taking place on this very day on which I am talking? And this gets to be fascinating to me. First, let's have a look at the Pittsburgh Gazette. We've looked at what the Londoners had to say about Sunday. Let's see what the Pittsburgh Gazette had to say about Sunday. There's no argument or question that our country was founded on Christian values that have eroded over the years. A Gazette article is illustrative. Church fading away after more than a century of worship. The subhead says the first Presbyterian church in struggling Clayton will close on the 27th of December, etc. Another article about the merit of religion appeared in December 20 Forum, saying religion is good for families and kids. Our Congress should revisit, and our candidates for president should consider advocating the restoration of Sunday as a day of rest, a paid day of rest, a required day of rest. Now we have the distraction of unnecessary shopping. And in the not too distant past, non-essential business establishments were required to be closed on Sunday. Americans deserve a day of rest, a day to be with families, attend church, and interact with people on an interpersonal level. Imagine shutting down the internet or cell phones for the day, how peaceful that would be. We have made a truly negative rat race with limited time available for potential for good interactions with one another. We need to restore one takeaway from our past. Sunday as a day of rest, a day of worship, of prayer that was invaluable to our family values and individual well-being. The odds are regretfully that our Sunday tradition of the past are gone forever, just as the odds that presidential candidates would even think of Sunday as an essential need. Merry Christmas. Well, what's going to take place at the mall? Today. Together, 2016 aims to unify 1 million Christians in prayer on the National Mall. Now, this is very important because it's not just anywhere. This is the central government of the papal power establishing a meeting on its territory. This is a signal to the world as to where we are going. It's not just in some stadium. The only other ones who've had the privilege of appearing in those situations are the Pope himself and a rally previously by Billy Graham, who also was a 33-degree Freemason. And the Pope is blessing this, and he calls it Together. And what are they saying? Pope Francis held up a black T-shirt adorned with an American flag last week on YouTube and urged young people to journey to Washington this month. Wear this T-shirt in unison and respond to the great restlessness. He's calling 1 million Christians to journey to the National Mall on July the 16th for a day of unifying prayer. We want to come together. We need to solve the problems of this world. We need to get rid of inequality. We need to get rid of racial hatred. We need to get rid of everything that divides us. And if there's one thing that can unite us and can heal the family, then it's Sunday. And he's made that quite clear in his encyclicals, even the encyclical that was lauded by Obama, that called for Sunday as a day of rest. And it was on the environment. The goal of Together is to get 1 million Christians to journey to the National Mall on July 16. This is a tremendous signal to the world for a day of unifying prayer. Nick Hall, the founder of the movement, hopes to unite people of all kinds. Jesus welcomes you whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. He welcomes whether you're young or old, whether you're an equal opportunity employer. Dozens of major Christian musicians and speakers from many denominations will perform on stage. near the Washington Monument. Among them, Francis Chan, Lecrae, Crowder, Hillsong, Passion, etc., etc. If we're singing the same songs together, then we can't yell at each other. They're going to perform. What does the Bible say? How will they come together? Will it not be with music, all kinds of music? Will they not bow down? Together is a modern-day evangelical revival complete with TED talks, hip-hop, and no politics. This week, thousands of evangelical Christians will gather near the Washington Monument for what organizers will hope will be a historic religious revival, the likes of which America hasn't seen in decades. As a modern-day one together has heavy social media branding, major music from hip-hop to folktronica to hard rock, and popular evangelists who know to keep the message TED talk. That means technology, entertainment, and design. It seems to me that what is predicted in the Bible is happening before our very eyes. And the world is being prepared for the ultimate entry, which I believe will begin in 2017, when the hatchet is buried between Protestants and Roman Catholics at their great Jubilee. And the others will follow, like the Swiss evangelical churches. They will come on board early in 2018. Hall said his goal is just to hold a huge Love Jesus rally, something that has been mostly absent from the American public life since the days of Billy Graham. Everything now is protests. I'm against this. I hate that. We really believe there's a longing to come together. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can come together around the hope of Jesus. He said there are moments when God's people come together and God does something that can heal, change, define generations. The sad part is that a longing of the soul is to be filled by all of these things. But sadly, there's a fulfillment of prophecy. Peace, peace, and what? Sudden destruction. Together is marketed as a huge day of Christian unity, a time when we will lay down what divides us. Politics, race, social issues, theological differences, to come together and lift up Jesus who unites us. Can you be united in error? Or can you only be united in truth? Although the lineup is entirely evangelical, except for a greeting from Pope Francis via Hall, some prominent evangelical leaders said the racial and gender diversity of the people who will be on the stage is groundbreaking. Around half will be non-white and perhaps a third will be female. The world longs to come together. Revelation 17 verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest, which is exactly the same as the 10 toes, the feet of iron and clay, are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. How will they do that? By asking the governments of the world, the new, friendlier, kinder, gentler leaders of the world, to implement legislation that will honor the first beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. The worst for me is that these people that will come together, and everybody who is in solidarity with them, have good intentions. There are some deceivers amongst them, yes, who are running the program and pushing their agenda. But the people themselves are misled. And they don't see that when they rush into this movement, And when they think that the problems will be solved, that they are actually creating the greatest problem of all, setting aside the authority of God for the authority of man. And they will have negated, when they finally get to that point, every single one of the principles instituted in Eden, and have made of non-effect the government of God. And it's up to us to warn the world and to tell them that the time has come for this church to play its role in the world and to teach people that the only way and the only kingdom that we can long for and hope for is the kingdom of Jesus Christ, where He is the ruler of the world, and where social justice is by His agenda and not by the world's agenda. Amen. Heavenly Father, as this world rushes towards a precipice, thinking that is trying to solve the problems of this world, the only thing standing between them and death is the truth. The truth as it is in Jesus. Help us, Lord, to make sure that these people can hear the truth. And the truth has three components. You are the way, the truth, and the life. All your commandments are truth, and your word is truth. Help us to build a foundation that is on a solid rock, and help us to witness to others to this effect. In Jesus' name, amen.
And I'm going to roll one more out here.
That people don't want the secret behind secret societies. Obviously, the secret behind secret societies is the secret that people don't want to spread abroad. Revelation 17:4, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colors, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having the golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. There's only one church in the whole world that uses a woman with a cup, and that is the Roman Church. And here is Città del Vaticano, using the woman with the golden cup, and she is called Fides on all their documents. Fides. Now, what does that mean? Fides. Well, let's go to a Masonic source, a very good Masonic source, written by Albert G. Mackey, the Manual of the Lodge. Albert Mackey was a 33-degree Freemason. It'll become clear as we go through the lectures what this means. And he says, the right hand has in all ages been deemed an emblem of fidelity, and our ancient brethren worship deity under the name of Fides, or fidelity, which was sometimes represented by two right hands joined, and sometimes by two human figures holding each other by the right hand. Numa was the first who erected the altar to Fides, under which the name, the goddess of oaths and honesty, was worshipped. So it means honesty and fidelity, but it is also an image of a female deity. Now, Revelation 17 verse 5 calls this institution the mother of prostitutes. In Revelation 18 verse 7, she says, I sit as queen, I am not a widow, and I will never mourn. So she might have lost some children during the Reformation, but she's going to get them back. I am, and there is none beside me. I will never be a widow or suffer loss of children. She's going to control the world in a spiritual sense. That's what this power says. Now, it's interesting that the Vatican has just recently, September 5, 2000, issued this encyclical, Dominus Iesus, where she says, other churches are no sisters of ours, the Vatican insists. It must always be clear that the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Universal Church is not the sister, but the mother of all the churches. Cardinal Ratzinger said that. He's the head of the Inquisition. They don't call themselves the Inquisition anymore. They call themselves the Congregation for Doctrine and Faith. But it's the same thing. It's even in the same building. Now, she's not the mother, she is not the sister, but the mother of all the churches. That means all the other churches are subject to her, right or wrong. That's what she says. Now in Revelation 13 verse 1 and 2, speaking about the same power, it says, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Now that's a very wow statement. The dragon gave him the power. In other words, this power comes from another source. Now, doesn't Catholicism preach Christianity? Yes, it does. Doesn't it preach Jesus Christ as the Savior of the world? Yes, it does. But it also preaches mediation through other mechanisms and through the church. Now, it is interesting that in secret societies there are always two doctrines. One for the initiated and one for the goyim, the uninitiated. And the Knights Templars had two doctrines. The one was the inside esoteric occult doctrine, and the other one was the exoteric, the one to the outside, and that was Catholicism. So the masses received a religion which the insiders turned on its head. Amongst occult insiders, Lucifer is the true Son of God. Jesus is a second son who was defeated by the first one who had been thrown out. So Lucifer is the true luminary, the victor in the battle, and will be the one who will be worshipped at the end of time. That is occult doctrine. That's always been the doctrine of the Kabbalah, the Kabbalist doctrine, and it has been the doctrine of Gnosticism. But of course, it's not what the Bible teaches, but then Catholicism doesn't teach what the Bible teaches either. Revelation 17, verses 12 to 14, talks about 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. And they will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he's Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Now we're going to deal with the whole chapter of Revelation 17 at a later stage. But the kings of the world, here represented by these 10, will give their power to the system, just like in the Middle Ages, and enforce the doctrines on an entire world. Very interesting. This will be this beast from the bottomless pit. Now, Gary H. Carr, in his work En route to global occupation, puts it this way. He says there were the ancient mystery religions which come from Babylon, and they were pantheistic, of course, which means God is in nature, God is in everything, which in effect makes us God then too. This was inculcated in Kabbalism, was taken over in the Christian era in what is called Gnosticism, and the Knights Templars were the inner secret core that had the ancient knowledge of the mystics. This was carried further through Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, and the Illuminati, which, according to Gary Carr, controls Marxism, American European secret societies and political societies, international banking, and the World Council of Churches. Now that sounds very strange. Is the World Council of Churches controlled by Freemasonry? We'll have to look into that in some detail. Then, of course, you have the entire New Age movement, the Theosophical societies, the many cults, and all these things are all controlled by this mechanism to make null and void the doctrine of salvation in Christ alone. That will be the final battle. And in order to achieve this, this woman has concealed herself and has hid herself in a garb of Christianity, and people receive the Goyim doctrine and do not know what the inner core doctrine is. That is quite something. Well, if we look at 1 Chronicles 16 verse 26, for all the gods of the people are idols, but the Lord made the heavens, tells us that idolatry is quite something that's rife on the earth. And Nimrod, the Lord of heaven, Tammuz, the pagan Messiah, and Semiramis, the queen of heaven, these find their origin in Babylon. And if you go through all the religions that were propagated in Lebanon, Phoenicia, Babylon, Assyria, Greece, Rome, Egypt, India, China, Mexico, Scandinavia, you have only this same picture under different names. Baal, Tammuz, Ashtoreth, El, Bacchus, Astarte, Belus, Tammuz, Rhea, Ishtar, Ninus, Hercules, Beltis, etc., etc. In Egypt, Ra, Osiris or Horus, Isis, Hathor, India, Vishnu, Krishna, Isi or Devaki, and so on and so on. Now, Romanism, the Roman Church, has taken this Trinity and made it Father, Mother, Child, which means that they must elevate the female to the point of deity. And we'll see how they did that and how they are doing that with the sanction of the Pope. So the true Trinity and the Roman Catholic Trinity are two different things. For the Goyim, it's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. For the inner circle, it's Father, Mother, Child, which is none other than Baal, Tammuz, and Ashtoreth, if you want to take it back to those times. Jupiter is the god who is worshipped under Petrus, the rock. And Ubi Petri, where Peter is, there is the church. So here's another rock which takes the place of the true rock. Christianity and the secret societies, we could just summarize it as follows. The old Babylonian religion gave rise to Kabbalism. Via the Essenes and others, Gnosticism came into existence, and Gnosticism was founded by Simon Magus. This comes from no other source than History de la Magie and by Eliphas Levi. Wow, that's a high Masonic source. So Gnosticism, founded by Simon Magus. Then this Gnosticism, with its secret doctrine, was eventually, over time, through many intermediary organizations, carried over to the Knights Templars. And the Knights Templars were a group of a Roman Catholic order, if you like, that were set over the temple site to protect it. And they had strong links to Islamic societies, the Ismailis, the Karmatites, the Fatimites, the Druzes, and the Assassins. And these are very, very interesting, and we'll be dealing with them when we talk about the Islamic connection, what the secret societies actually teach. Just like the Templars had two doctrines, one for the Goyim, the uninitiated, and one for the insiders, and the two diametrically opposed to each other, so the secret societies of Islam do exactly the same thing. But that's another lecture. Now the Templars, they had their secret inner information inculcated in the Rosicrucians and the Jesuits. The Jesuits, again, formed and created Freemasonry. And Freemasonry was created as the Protestant arm of the Roman Catholic Church. Unbeknown to them, beguiled, fooled, if you like, into doing the work that Rome wanted them to do, so that Rome could sit in the background while Freemasonry did it for them. And then it wasn't them, it was them. And it was mainly Protestants that were doing it, and not Rome. Very clever. Very, very clever indeed. So now let's have a look at these Knights Templars. Here are some of the representations. This is Desmaloy, the founder of the, or not the founder, but the leader at the time of its dissolution of the Knights Templars. This is what their dress looked like, if you like, and that is one of their symbols. It is a symbol that is used by many churches today. Did you know that? Many charismatic churches use that symbol. That's fascinating. And Jehovah's Witnesses use that symbol as well. We'll come to that in another lecture. Now let's have a look at what Nestor Webster, Secret Societies and Subversive Movements, has to say about the Templars. We're not going to read it all, but you can always, if you get the video, stop the quote. In the year 1118, 19 years after the First Crusade ended with the defeat of the Muslims, the capture of Antioch and Jerusalem, these groups were founded that were eventually established as the Templars, and they presented them with a house near the site of the Temple of Solomon, hence their name, Knights Templars. And they became very famous and a very powerful order which controlled all the finances, the financial world. They were the banking elite of the world, if you like. And then in the year 1128, the order was sanctioned by the Council of Troyes and by the Pope. It was a Roman Catholic order within the church. Now, some years later, October 13, 1307, this order was officially brought to an end by the King of France because it had come to light what they were doing, so it was said. The King of France, Philippe le Bel, had the Templars arrested, and the date was Friday the 13th, October 1307, and since that day, Friday the 13th is a day of bad luck for the entire world. And the charges brought against them were: the ceremony of initiation into the order was accomplished by insults to the cross and the denial of Christ and gross obscenities. Gross obscenities. There were all kinds of things reminiscent of Sodom that had to take place there. The adoration of an idol, which was said to be the image of the true God, and that was Baphomet, this symbol over here of the androgenic male-female deity. The omission of the words of the consecration of the Mass, the right that the lay chiefs amongst themselves giving absolution, and authorization of unnatural vice. So they had to curse the cross, trample upon Jesus, swear allegiance to Baphomet, and sanction this with unusual vice. It's a pretty serious crime in those days, so he was sentenced to death. But the order actually didn't disappear. The Pope was very reluctant to say that it was so. Masonic ritual includes references to the Knights Templars. For example here, Secret Societies and Subversive Movements says, several knights who had set forth the rescue of the holy places of Palestine from the Saracens formed an association under the name of Freemasons, thus indicating that their principal desire was the reconstruction of the Temple of Solomon. And you hear a lot about the reconstruction of the Temple of Solomon today, and the story of Israel and all those interesting things. Now let's go a little bit into some of the history. I'm taking you to this beautiful palace. Where do you think it is? It's in Jerusalem. And it's Notre Dame Vatican. And this is where the Pope has his representation in Jerusalem. It's a palace for a king. There's the Vatican flag flying outside. And there's even a whole lane where you have some interesting papal artifacts. Now in Jerusalem, I went to look up the site of the Knights. And here is the Knights Palace, the Latin Patriarchate. This is where the Knights Templars originally had a site, and the Knights of the Papacy now control this area. This is their symbol that they use. That is also the Knight's shield, which is used by many religions today. The Rema Church uses that symbol, for example. These are the eternal warriors. That is the symbol that they use. There they are they kiss the Pope or the Patriarch's ring. They are knighted just like knights, and they knight highly prominent bankers and individuals such as that. Inside this church, you have, of course, the statue of Jupiter as Peter. Notice that the foot is well kissed. And I didn't want to kiss the foot, so I just stood there. And it is a very important church because both Pope Paul VI and Pope John Paul II visited this church, which is, of course, highly symbolic, and there are the plaques. And the Latin Patriarch, the Knights Palace. If you go inside, there's this interesting altar. And as you look at the altar, you'll see certain figures over here. This one over here is very interesting. Let me get it a little bit closer. And what do you see? You see the double-headed eagle, which is also the symbol that is used in Freemasonry. So there it is on the altar of the knights. And what is there on this side? Two swords held like a compass. Fascinating. So there are many, many Masonic figures in here. The tail feathers and the feathers of the eagle, very reminiscent of what you have, for example, on the back of the dollar, and all those other interesting symbols of the circle with the triangle and the sun around it. And the inheritor of the Templar nuance are the Jesuits. Now the Jesuits, of course, are the ones who behind the scenes control many things. They were founded on the 15th of August, 1534 by Ignatius Loyola and were sanctioned by the Pope on the 27th of September, 1540. So they were created, as it were, to stand against the Reformation. They were designed to destroy the Reformation. Loyola wanted the order to be champions of Catholic unity, and of course submission to Christ's vicar, the Pope, was absolutely essential. Here you have the institution of Loyola's organization by the Pope on this particular day, and there are some interesting analogies which we will find here. Here, for example, there is considerable analogy between Masonic and Jesuitic degrees. And the Jesuits also tread down the shoe and bear the knee because Ignatius Loyola thus presented himself at Rome and asked for the confirmation of the order. Now, who existed first? Freemasons or the Jesuits? The Jesuits existed first, of course. They were to obey as a corpse, perite a cadaver. The reconstitutions repeat 500 times that one must see Christ in the person of the general, and even if God gave you a dog, you must obey him as though he were Jesus Christ himself. Loyola's statue in a Jesuit retreat, Loyola in vision, the Society of Jesus constituted in the Chapel Notre Dame, Notre-Dame, 1534, now the Chapel of the Sacred Heart in Paris. Many, many occult incrustations, and this is the famous Jesuit oath that each Jesuit makes when he becomes a Jesuit. Now, it'll tell us something about the character of the Jesuits. There it says, I, and he fills in his name, in the presence of God and all the saints and all these things, swear that His Holiness the Pope is Christ's vice-regent and is the true and only head of the Catholic Universal Church, etc. It also says here that this power was given by the Savior, Jesus Christ. He has power to dispose heretical kings, princes, states, commonwealths, governments, all being illegal without his sacred confirmation, and that they may safely be destroyed. So a Jesuit swears that if a government is not subject to Rome, it can be what? Destroyed. I further declare that I will help and assist and advise all or any of His Holiness's agents wherever I shall be, and do my utmost to extirpate the heretical Protestant or liberal doctrines. Liberal doctrines are doctrines where you decide what you believe. You take the liberty of making your own choice rather than allowing the Pope to do it for you. And that will be destroyed, and all their pretended powers. And that it doesn't matter where you send me in the world, I will obey. And I promise that I will have no opinion of my own. I will obey like a corpse. And I will make war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth. I will spare neither sex, age, nor condition, and I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, crush their infants' heads against the wall in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. That's quite a nice Christian promise, would you agree? Very Christian promise. Did they do it? Well, the Waldenses, they smashed the children's heads against the rocks to make the parents rescind. In the Ottoman Empire, that's an interesting story, In Serbia and in all those East Bloc countries where they occupied, they took the children, threw them in the air, and caught them on the ends of their bayonets. They were nice people. Now you will say that was Islam, that wasn't Jesuits. Well, debatable. We'll talk about it another time. And if I cannot do it openly, I will do it secretly. So that is what a Jesuit swears. This is the famous Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, the most prestigious Catholic university in the world. The Jesuits, in all their enclaves, have their figures in caves. Now, in paganism, all the deities come out of the cave, and they have the letters IHS, which actually stand for Isis, Horus, Set, which is the Egyptian Trinity. They, of course, say it means Iesus hominum salvator, Jesus the Savior of men, but it doesn't. It means IHS, Isis, Horus, Set. And their symbol is the triangle with the all-seeing eye in it for this deity. They also use the pillar, the stela, if you like. They have the symbol of the triangle with the eye in a circle, which is also the symbol used in the New Age movement. And we saw that Gary Carr says that Freemasonry controls the New Age movement and the Jesuits control the Freemasonry, or created it. This is the University of the Jesuits in Prague. On top of it they have Atlas, not Jesus Christ. If you go to a more modern Jesuit enclave like this one in Germany, I visited this. I'm quite cheeky sometimes, there I am. And took a picture, and inside they have this picture of Christ. This is not Christ, this is Atlas, holding the world on top of his shoulders, disguised. They have these symbols up against the wall. There, this symbol is the symbol of Hermes. If you take away the cross, then you have the symbol of Isis. This is paganism at its best. And these symbols over here are nothing. Here it is, Jesuit Kirche, when it was built, etc. And their symbolism, Maria, the M is the Masonic M, the triangle, Ria, the goddess. Here is a church in Germany, a cathedral. Inside you will see this circle with a cross in it, the crossed swords, symbol of all symbols used also in Freemasonry. Now if you go back to ancient Assyria, that was a very prominent cross. It was the Maltese cross. It comes from ancient paganism. They have the symbols of the star over here, two stars one over the other, or two crosses one over the other. They have the compass, they have the moon with a disc in it or a star in it, which is the symbol that Islam uses, for example. They have the solar calendar and the triple crown. All of these are used by the papacy. Upside down crosses represent victory over Christ. Hammers and compasses and sickles, these are symbols that are prevalent in the world. There's Jesus standing above the skull and crossbones, which is a symbol of Jupiter, the god Jupiter, who is a symbol, of course, who is Lucifer. Upside down crosses again. This is a very important cathedral in Europe, in Germany, where all the political leaders come together. If you go there, you will have Janus, the two-headed one. And then you have the statue so-called of David. But of course it isn't David, it is the god Pan, because he has a pan flute in his hand. And David didn't play a pan flute. So I went to look for the dark side of Pan, because there's a light side and a dark side. And I found him, there he is, the hoofed one in the same cathedral. So they hide their occult symbolism. If you enter into the hallway, you find this over here. This is the god Anubis. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. There you have him as well. Plus you have the phoenix rising from the ashes. Plus you have the symbol of Jupiter and a whole host of other symbols over there. And in their side chapel, you have all the signs of the zodiac serving the various deities like Mars and Aquarius, etc. And the doorknob is a yin-yang. This has nothing to do with Christianity. They use the symbol of the compass and Jupiter and the PX symbol over there, which you will find in virtually every single Christian denomination upon the face of the earth. The phoenix rising from the ashes, the peacock, all symbols of Lucifer. Here you have the PX with a circle with a dot in it. And you say to yourself, but isn't that a symbol of Christianity? No, this is a symbol of Horus. This has got nothing to do with Christianity. They use pine cones. Let's ask Albert Mackey, 33-degree Freemason, to tell us what the symbol means. The point within the circle is an interesting and important symbol in Freemasonry. The symbol is really a beautiful but somewhat abstruse allusion to the old sun worship, and introduces us for the first time to that modification of it among the ancients, the worship of the phallus. So it's a pretty filthy symbol at that. It deals with male organs. Wow. So that comes from the horse's mouth. So that's what it means. Now what's the PX mean? Let's go to the best Masonic source in the world, Morals and Dogma, page 292. And in case you don't believe me, I photocopied it so that you can see it. There you can see the symbol. Can you see that? It is the staff of Osiris. On the medal of Constantinople, in hoc signat eris, whatever the inscriptions. And then some other interesting things. So this is the staff of Osiris. And then it goes through the mystic Tau and the crosses and the stars of David. And then he uses this one as well. Interesting symbol. He says the vestment of the priest of Horus were covered with these crosses. That's a Maltese cross. Remember that I showed it to you on the Assyrian king? Now, who wears that on his vestments? Well, let's have a look. Oops, there it is. Who's wearing it? The Pope is wearing it. So what is he? He must be the priest of Horus. So to the outside world, it seems like Christianity, but to the inner circle, it's occultism. On the floor of the cathedral in London, you have the tricolour, which is the triple yin yang. And what does that mean? Well, let's go and ask the sources themselves. Celtic version of the yin yang. That's what it is. The tricolour, the sea, good luck, cauldron, Celtic goddess, the goddess of wisdom and witchcraft. Who was enthroned in the French Revolution? Goddess of reason, witchcraft, reason, all these things, same deity. On the floor of the same cathedral, you find the mystic Tau. What does the Tau represent? Let's ask another Mason, Ward. He says it's the symbol of the male creative side of the deity, sign language of the mysteries. So again, it has a sexual connotation. What's it doing on the floor of a cathedral? So the Jesuits are the heirs of the occult religion, and they control the world through their agencies. They stand in the background, create sub-organizations, and everybody thinks they are not active. Let's ask them themselves what they believe. Here is the history of the generals of the Society of Jesus. These are all the generals, starting with Ignatius Loyola. They're all listed down there. We don't have to go through them all the way through to the present one that rules now, whose name is Peter Hans Kolvenbach. Nice German name. It's interesting that the Germans are very prominent in this. Peter Hans Kolvenbach is the head of the Jesuits. Cardinal Ratzinger, another German, is the head of the Inquisition. They seem to be pretty much in control. What does he look like? There he is, Peter Hans Kolvenbach. You're looking probably at one of the mightiest men on the earth today, if not the mightiest. He's the Black Pope. Here you have the cave of Loyola. Here you have George W. Bush and the Pope in audience with each other. And they don't do anything by chance. They just happen to do this exactly under that picture I showed you, where Loyola receives his commission from the Pope. Now, the ceremony of induction and the extreme oath of the Jesuits, Library of Congress, catalog card, there it is. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between communities, provinces and states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous. Cultivating the art and the sciences and enjoying the blessings of peace, to take sides with the combatants and to act secretly in concert with your brother Jesuit, who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that with which you might be connected, only that the church may be the gainer in the end, in the conditions fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. Whoa! This is Hegelian science. Two opposing viewpoints, dialectic thinking. You war the one with the other, and you rub them up until nothing is left. It's called thesis, antithesis, and the resultant clash brings synthesis, that which you want. Now note that the Jesuit can be very active on the one side, but he can be equally active on the other side. So this is all a process whereby they wish to attain things. The 30-Year War. And what was that about? The aim and the object was that that war should in truth become a war of annihilation. Besides, was it possible for them to allow peace to be concluded with countries whose rebellious governments had issued a law ruling that no Jesuit should ever again dare to show his face? Do you know that the Jesuits were thrown out of virtually all countries, including Catholic ones, because they were so divisive? Catholic kings couldn't even take the Jesuits and threw them out. If a Catholic king dared to throw out a Jesuit, that country was destroyed, Catholic or not, and the Jesuits are back. You can take your bottom dollar for that. So, the frightful responsibility for this terrible 30 Years' War must rest upon the Emperor Ferdinand II and his teachers, rulers, and bosom friends, the sons of Loyola. Every single thing I'm saying is a quote. Popery, an enemy to civil religious liberty. In 1550, Pope Julius declared his claim to universal temporal political power, evidenced by a new coin he issued, its motto having read, "The nation and kingdom that will not serve me shall perish." Now please note that this is a Roman Catholic statement, that the nation and the kingdom that does not serve the papacy will perish. What does that mean in terms of Protestant countries then? Are they going to be in trouble, yes or no? I would say yes, they will be in trouble. Thomas Aquinas, the great philosopher of the Roman Catholic Church, said, "The Pope by divine right has spiritual and temporal power as supreme king of the world. The Pope of Rome, as head of the papal government, claims absolute sovereignty and supremacy over all the governments of the earth." All the governments. All these quotes are highly potent quotes. There is nothing mediocre in these quotes, and they come from the highest sources. The right of deposing kings is inherent in the supreme sovereignty which the popes as vice-regent of Christ exercise over all Christian nations. Cardinal Henry Manning, 1892, he was Archbishop of Westminster. So, he is in control of all nations of the world. Now it's interesting that the Bible tells us that these words were put on the Christ's cross at the crucifixion. Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. You read that in John 19:19. But the Roman Catholic crucifix has the words INRI written on it. Now, if you look it up in Webster's dictionary, it means Jesus Nazarenos Rex Iuderum. But in the extreme oath of the Jesuits, INRI means something totally different. It means Iustum necare reges impios, which means it is just to exterminate or annihilate impious or heretical kings, governments, or rulers. That's an interesting point. Now, another thing that they want to do is destroy Protestantism. We cherish at the bottom of our hearts this principle that whatever does not unite with us must be annihilated. And we hold ourselves ready to make, as soon as we shall have the means, an energetic application of these principles. Protestantism is already wearing out and sinking to decay. Yes, we are destined to insult its last agonies, to march over its broken skeleton and scattered bones. Oh, let us hasten this dissolution by our strong and united efforts. Then already, they wrote, Protestantism is becoming decomposed, and we are gaining men of note. This is extracts from The Secret Plan. Those are the worst of the Catholics, the Inquisitors, the Jesuits. They are simply the Romish army for the earthly sovereignty of the world in the future, with the Pontiff of Rome for emperor. Something like a universal serfdom with them as master is what is being planned. That's all they stand for. They don't even believe in God, perhaps, the brothers Karamazov. All these quotes. The general of the Jesuits insists on being master sovereign over sovereigns. Wherever the Jesuits are admitted, they will be master, cost what it may. The society is by nature dictatorial, and therefore it is the irreconcilable enemy of all constituted authority. 50 Years in the Church of Rome, written by Father Cheniking. Ignatius Loyola says himself, the power of the general will be so unlimited that should he deem it necessary for the honor of God, he shall even be able to send back, or in another direction, those who have come direct from the popes. So this is a powerful order. Friedrich von Hartenberg said, never before in the course of the world's history has such a society appeared. The old Roman Senate itself did not lay schemes for world domination with greater certainty of success. They want world dominion, with the Pope enthroned as the universal ruler. The Roman Catholic Lafayette said, it is my opinion that if the liberties of this country, the United States of America, are destroyed, it will be by the subtlety of the Roman Catholic Jesuit priests, for they are the most crafty, dangerous enemies to civil and religious liberty. They have instigated most of the wars of Europe. These are prominent people speaking. Morse, he's the founder of the Morse code, the inventor of the Morse code. He said, and who are these agents? They are for the most part Jesuits. An ecclesiastical order proverbial through the world for cunning, duplicity, and total want of moral principle, an order so skilled in all the arts of deception that even in Catholic countries, in Italy itself, it became intolerable and the people required its suppression. That's another prominent man. Archduke Maximal Francis said, they have so constantly mixed themselves up in the court and state intrigues that they must in justice be reproached with striving after universal dominion. And we could go on and on and on. This is a very interesting one. This is Michelangelo Tamburni, 1720. This is the Jesuit of the general of the Jesuits, the general speaking to the Duke of Brancas, and he said the following. See, my lord, from this room I govern not only Paris, but China. Not only China, but the whole world, without anyone knowing how 'tis managed. Interesting. This is what the Jesuits themselves had to say. The Pope's confessor has to be a Jesuit. And the Pope himself has to come to a Jesuit to confess. The Vatican Empire, everything I say is a quote. This here is Jean-Baptiste Janssen. He ruled from 1946 to 1964, and he looks like a charming gentleman, very cheerful. But nevertheless, you can see that this photograph was taken from the Saturday Evening Post, 1959, and this is what he is in command of. And now we will want to deal with these issues in the next session. He controls the following secret societies. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta. So he is in control of the Knights of Malta. The Scottish Rite Shrine of Freemasonry, the Order of the Illuminati, the Knights of Columbus, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, B'nai B'rith, the Nation of Islam and its private army called the Fruit of Islam, the Mafia Commission, Opus Dei, along with a host of lesser brotherhoods. So each one of those secret societies is controlled by the Jesuits. Persecution of the Catholic Church in Germany has been directed only against those elements which did not entirely submit to the ever-increasing centralization of authority in church and state. So sometimes it looks as if even the Catholics are suffering, but only those Catholic groups that are not totally submissive to this system will be subjugated. Some Catholic orders were actually opposed to the Jesuits. They were killed. They were wiped out. In the French Revolution, the Dominicans had taken over the Inquisition from the Jesuits. Boom, they were zapped. And the Jesuits took it back. Its objective was, and is still, to destroy the effects of the Reformation and to re-establish the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. A greater Germany, in other words, must be made again the center of a revived Holy Roman Empire. Leo H. Lehman, 1942, an American historian, said that. Isn't it fascinating that the Russian president, or a Russian president, let me put it that way, and many political leaders have given the assurance that Germany will once again play a greater role in the new Europe today. Isn't it also fascinating that it was a Jesuit priest, Father Stempfler, and not Hitler, who wrote Mein Kampf? In fact, you can read it on Mein Kampf itself. Now, the SS used this symbol of the skull and crossbones. What was that a symbol of? Do you remember? It was the symbol of Jupiter, the god Jupiter, the god of death. It's also the symbol of Osiris, who was the god of death. Anubis is just another form of Osiris. He is the god of death. He's the god of the dead. But Jesus says, I am the God of the living. I am not the God of the dead. I'd rather serve the God of the living. The SS was organized by Himmler according to Jesuit order principles. The rules of service, spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius Loyola constituted a model which Himmler strove carefully to copy. Absolute obedience was the supreme rule. Every order had to be executed without comment. Every single statement is being read from a reputable source. Again, in that wonderful book, The Great Controversy, we get an idea of the Jesuits. Throughout Christendom, Protestantism was menaced by formidable foes. The first triumphs of the Reformation past, Rome summoned new forces hoping to accomplish its destruction. At this time, the order of the Jesuits was created. Notice what this quote says. The most cruel, unscrupulous, and powerful of all the champions of popery. Cut off from every earthly tie and human interest, dead to the claims of natural affection, reason, and conscience, wholly silenced, they knew no rule, no tie, but that to their order, and no duty but to extend its power. We don't have to read the whole quote. But they made it their business to destroy Protestantism. The Jesuit order therefore stands before us as the embodiment of a system which aims at temporal political domination, and that over the whole world. You will say to me, surely China will not be subject. Well, we already read a quote by the Jesuit general himself where he says he controls China. Who controls communism? The Jesuits created it, and therefore they controlled it. They practiced it in their South American examples where they practiced it before they instituted it. Very interesting. This is Count von Hernsbruch, 1911, German noble and ex-Jesuit, who says this very thing. At what then do the Jesuits aim? According to them, they seek the greater glory of God, but if you examine the facts, you will find they aim at universal dominion alone. It is they who rule the world. One quote after the other. Moreover, the Pope has thousands of secret agents worldwide. They include the Jesuits, the Knights of Columbus, the Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, and others. The Vatican's intelligence service and its field resources are second to none. Even Dave Hunt, American Baptist historian, says that. So, let's have a look at some of these institutions. Let's have a look at Freemasons. The Grand Design Exposed says, the truth is the Jesuits of Rome have perfected Freemasonry to be their most magnificent and effective tool, accomplishing their purposes among Protestants. Now surely the members of Freemasonry themselves must be deceived, because if they saw it, they wouldn't do it, right? So actually, the order is being used and they themselves are deceived. And only within the order, higher up, are those chosen ones who know, and they are controlled by the Jesuits for Rome. Very clever. Very clever. To make Protestantism do what you cannot do openly because you have been fingered by Protestantism as the Antichrist. So this is very interesting. This is a Templar fortress and a church on the island Mallorca, Spain. And there again you have the double-headed eagle, and you can go to virtually any church on that island and you will find the double-headed eagle over the altars of these churches. As I've said, Adam Weishaupt was the father of Jacobinism, and he is the one who is also the founder of the Illuminati. From the Jesuit college at Ingolstadt, it is said to have issued the sect known as the Illuminati of Bavaria, founded by Adam Weishaupt. Its nominal founder, however, seems to have played a subordinate, though conspicuous, role in the organization of the sect. You see, again, they use a front and a front and a front. Now, here are two Jesuit generals. This one over here is General Ricci, and this is General Ledochowski. And very interesting, this one over here, 1773 to 1840, he ruled during the order's suppression. Now notice this, the Vatican itself suppressed the Jesuits, between 1773 and 1814. What happened to the Vatican in that time? There was a mortal wound, and the Pope was taken into exile and he died. Isn't that correct? So who gave the mortal wound to the papacy? The own order in the own church. Power struggle. And he created, in his time, the Illuminati was created through Weishaupt, and of course is also the father of modern communism, who with his Jacobins conducted the French Revolution. Years later, Jesuit General Ledochowski with his Bolsheviks conducted the Russian Revolution in 1917, and it's identical to the other revolution. And I will deal with that when I give a lecture on revolutions and wars and dictators later in the series. France's greatest authority on the Jesuits, Edmond Paris, said, "The Russian Revolution, by eliminating the Tsar, protector of the Orthodox Church, had it not decapitated the great rival and helped the penetration of the Roman Church? We must strike while the iron is hot." The famous Russicum, Russian College of Rome, is created in 1929, and its clandestine missionaries will take the good news to its schismatic country. 1 century after their expulsion by Tsar Alexander I, the Jesuits will again undertake the conquest of the Slav world. And did the poor Slavic world suffer? They were slaughtered by the millions. History will show what happened there when Stalin, probably one of the greatest mass murderers of all time, did his thing. Frederick the Great, so-called, of Prussia, caused the high degrees of Masonic constitutions of the ancient rite to be revived, and he himself wrote the constitutions under the guide of the Jesuit general. Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, Albert G. Mackey says that himself. Very interesting. And now notice this. This is a source that's unbelievable. This is ISIS Unveiled by Blavatsky herself, the author of Secret Doctrine. She says that the rites are the offspring of the sons of Ignatius Loyola. The Scottish Rite and all of these worked under the instructions from the general of the Jesuits. So who controls Freemasonry? The Jesuits, there's no doubt about it. Here, we have confirmed the induction of the Knights Templar Mason into the councils of the said order of knighthood, and hoping in confiding that he will ever be so demean himself as to conduct to the glory of IHS, the most holy and almighty God, and to the honor of the mark we do recommend. There's a ritual in Freemasonry which is totally Jesuit. So the Jesuits control Freemasonry. Here's a Freemason temple, if you like. It's in Oklahoma. There is IHS. This is a Freemason temple. It's a lodge. There is IHS in it. There are still old ladies, male and female, about the country who will tell you with grim gravity that if you trace up masonry through all its orders till you come to the grand tip-top head mason of the world, you will discover that the dread individual and the chief of the Society of Jesus are one and the same person. James Patron, American historian. There are many that say these things. Knights of Malta. The Freemasons are in the foreground, while the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta are in the background. The Jesuits control even the Knights of Malta. Now, who are they? Well, they are headquartered in Rome, these knights. They used to be on an island, but besides that, they used to be a military order. They are still a military order. They are knights. They control the banking of the world, the industry of military complexes of the world. They oversee Chase Manhattan Bank with all its branches. They rule all the intelligence communities, the KGB, the CIA, and all of these things to restore the Dark Ages. Everything I'm saying is a quote. I'm saying nothing. Don't accuse me of saying anything. I'm just reading. Who are they? Well, here's the head of the Knights of Malta at the moment in America. Well, he's dead now. This is Francis Joseph Cardinal Spellman, Cardinals of New York. And their headquarters is St. Patrick's Cathedral, the diocese of the Archbishop of New York. There are the various ones. Here's Terence Cardinal Cook. Then was Cardinal O'Connor, and currently Cardinal Archbishop of New York, Edward M. Egan. Now let's have a look who the members of the Knights of Malta are. That should be interesting. Some past, some present. General Alavena, George Anderson, Angleton, Azru, Bertie, Bobs, Bonaparte. Does that name ring a bell? Borges, Bradley, Brady, Pat Buchanan. Does that name ring a bell? James Buckley, Prescott Bush. Does that ring a bell? Frank Capra, William Casey. Does that ring a bell? CIA, Cisnero, Cooks, Coughlin, Loach, Giscard d'Estaing. Does that ring a bell? President of France, Bill Donovan, Alan Dulles, Avery Dulles, Edward Egan. That's of course the Cardinal himself. Franz Egon, John Farrell, Flanagan, Flynn, Gelly, Galen, Gorman, Grace, General Alexander Haig. Does that ring a bell? Otto von Habsburg, wow. Conrad Hilton, Heinrich Himmler, he was at Knights of Malta. J. Edgar Hoover, FBI, CIA fame. Joseph Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, Larkin, Lehman, Lorenza, Luce, Henry Luce, founder of all the great magazines and Time magazine and all of them. Great publishing magnate, MacDonald, Manhattan, you name them, all of them. O'Neill, Otis, Franz von Papen, the legate who worked with Adolf Hitler, Perón, Rocco. The list goes on and on and on. Frank Shakespeare, Martin Shea, even Frank Sinatra was a Knight of Malta, for interest's sake. So there are prominent men who are Knights of Malta. Now, what about the Knights of Columbus? The founder of the Knights of Columbus is Father Michael McGivney. He lived a very short time, then he died. He was very young. He died at the age of 38. There is their emblem, and this is their official home webpage. You can just take it straight off, and you can see something fascinating. What is that? Hello? Do you remember what it is? A little bundle of rods that you also found in the French Revolution, right there in the Manifest of Human Rights. What is it? Fasciae. And they've got a wreath around them. What does that mean? All power in one man. Who will that man be? Who do the Knights Columbus, founded by a Roman Catholic priest, want to see the power vested in? The Pope, of course. The Knights of Columbus, founded at New Haven, Connecticut, 1882. Then it was already considered 300,000 strong. Only Roman Catholics are eligible. It is initiative to service in 4 degrees. It's the heart and soul of politics. You cannot get into politics if you don't have the stamp of approval of these guys. The fact is well known to political machines and non-Catholic politicians whose candidates must receive the approval of Rome and the knights before they dare nominate them for either dog pound or presidency. The Knights of Columbus' principal business is politics, a Jesuitical politics. So Menace to the Nations, Jeremiah Crowley, is the quote. These are serious accusations. There they are, with their fasciae, which will become clearer as we go on, and we can see where we are heading. For today, Rome considers listen to this. Today, Rome considers the fascist regime the nearest to its dogmas and interests. We have not merely the Reverend Jesuit Father Coughlin praising Mussolini's Italy as a Christian democracy, but their official magazine, which is Civiltà Cattolica, this is the official Jesuit magazine, says, this is the house organ of the Jesuits, says, fascism is the regime that corresponds most closely to the concepts of the Church of Rome. This is scary. Have you noticed lately that there is more and more control? Have you noticed some of these things? Have you noticed that you are being treated more and more like someone who has to bow 20,000 times before the powers? Then there is the organization Opus Dei. Is a semi-secret religious lay order with paramount objective is total support of the papacy. And these people walk around with clamps that tear into their flesh so that they have constant pain with every movement to remind them of their obligation. And they have high members, like presidents, for example, of Portugal, is an Opus Dei member. Then we have the Skull and Bones organization. And who are they? Well, they have this interesting skull and bones. What does it represent? You know that by now. Jupiter. And they have the number 322. If you look up Genesis chapter 3, verse 22, you will find, now man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, raising man to the level of deity. This is Yale University, the place where they are. Now let's consult one of the greatest authorities on skull and bones. That is Anthony Sutton. Let's ask him who he is. Educated at the Universities of London, Göttingen, California, former research fellow at the Hoover Institute, Stanford University, as well as economics professor of California State University. He had the guts to speak out and write a book, and it cost him dearly. But nevertheless, let's quote him. There is the book, Anthony Sutton, America's Secret Establishment, an Introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones. So that I don't say it, let's quote it. Skull and Bones, it's over, it's Bush. Bush won the election. Let's watch this video.
Yale University, the scions of America's first families confess their sexual exploits from a gruesome coffin. In a smoke-filled room, a handful of power brokers manipulate the global economy. These are the purported activities of some of America's secret societies, groups with names like Bilderberg, Skull and Bones, and the Trilateral Commission. The Skull and Bones Society is founded in 1832 by 15 seniors at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. They establish a secret society with rules and rituals that remain unchanged to this day. The Skull and Bones initiation ceremony is said to be held in April in the tomb's basement. One distinguished member serves as master of ceremonies. Once enrobed, he is known as Uncle Toby. The shortest senior is appointed Little Devil and dons a satanic costume. A bonesman with a deep voice is dressed as Don Quixote. Another is dressed as the college's founder, Elihu Yale. Still another is given papal vestments. It would all be funny if it weren't for the fact that among the former bonesmen are 3 presidents: William Howard Taft, George Bush, George W. Bush, numerous senators and ambassadors, industrialists like William Whitney, CIA agents, State Department officials, and publishing magnate Henry Luce. Absolute secrecy is also required. In his 1999 autobiography, George W. Bush devotes just one sentence to his membership in Skull and Bones. Quote, "My senior year, I joined Skull and Bones, a secret society so secret, I can't say anything more." The secrecy, according to some researchers, is there to protect the fact that Skull and Bones funnels its initiates into positions of power and influence.
The best-known bonesman is ex-President George Bush, who, according to tradition, is supposed to avoid admitting he's a member.
Mr. President, are you a member of Skull and Bones?
Leave the room.
American Journal got a similar response when we recently asked George Bush Jr., the governor of Texas, about his membership.
Does it still exist? I mean, the thing is so secret, I'm not even sure it still exists.
Okay, so you'll see that George W. Bush is a member. They lie in a coffin. They bow down before a papal figure, swear allegiance. They do all kinds of weird sexual things in a coffin, which I'm not going to explain what they do here. It's pretty vile. And these are the presidents of the most powerful countries in the world, and they belong to secret societies such as this. The order, what it is and how it began. Those on the inside know it as the order. Others have known it for more than 150 years as Chapter 322 of a German secret society. That is very important. In fact, this was discovered when they broke in and stole some of the papers at that institution. It is officially known as the Russell Trust of 1856, or as the Brotherhood of Death, because they serve the god of death, who happens to be Anubis, if you like, Osiris, if you like, or Jupiter. The American chapter of the German order was founded in 1833 at Yale University by General William Huntington Russell, and Taft, the only man to be both President and Chief Justice of the United States. Interesting. Now, the German order, what does this actually mean? The Illuminati had its origin at the University of Ingolstadt, and recruits were from the student Inkorps. Of course, they had to be students with high connections, you know, sons of very high insiders. The order had its origin in Yale in 1833, but Skull and Bones is a chapter of a German secret society. So, which organization does it represent? Active members have enough influence to push their sons and relatives into the order, and there's significant intermarriage amongst the families, and they fall into major categories, two major categories. We find the old line, American families, second, families who occupy great wealth. When he's initiated into the order, he says, tonight he will die to the world and be born again into the order, as he will henceforth refer to it. The order is a world unto itself, in which he will have a new name, and 14 new blood brothers also with new names. Now, there's also a British chapter which was established at Oxford University and All Souls College, and the British element is called the Group. So the Skull and Bones is not the only one. You have the Group, and then you have a European order as well. So the Group links to the Jewish equivalent through the Rothschilds, the Inner Circle, and so there is a worldwide secret organization which has the highest individual in industry, government, all facets of life. And they actually are the most prominent rulers in the world today. And if they are a chapter of a German society, then they are the Illuminati. And George W. Bush said that there are 1,000 points of light illuminating the world at the moment. It's interesting that the order writes many constitutions. The members write constitutions. For example, Archibald MacLeish, who is a member of Skull and Bones, or was, he wrote the Constitution of UNESCO. Now, we're going to have to deal with UNESCO and find out what it's about. Churches, the Union Theological Seminary is under the control of Skull and Bones. A very interesting seminary. We'll deal with these in more detail in another lecture. Major establishment of law firms, communications and industry, the Federal Reserve, And all of these are controlled by the order. This is how Chapter 322 operates. There's a central inner core. Notice that this is actually the all-seeing eye, the wedge of the eye, but that's something else. There's an inner core, there's an inner circle, there's an outer circle, there's an Atlantic circle, the Bohemian Club, notice there, Bohemian Club, part of Skull and Bones, Pilgrim Society, Penumbra Order, Chapter 322 of the Order, the Trilateral Commission. That's how it's put together. You could basically put it this way: Council of Foreign Relations, United Nations, Bilderbergs, Club of Rome, Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the Trilateral Commission, with the Illuminati controlling everything on the inside, forming basically the Round Table. Now you saw that the Bohemian Club is part and parcel of the issue. Now what is this Bohemian Club? Well, here's the Bohemian Grove. The August 2, 1982 edition of Newsweek reported, this is just another quote, the world's most prestigious summer camp, the Bohemian Grove, is now in session 75 miles north of San Francisco. It's in a forest. It's a fortress. But strangely, even fortresses can be breached, and one enterprising journalist managed to sneak in. The fiercely guarded 2,000-acre retreat is the country's extension of San Francisco's all-male, ultra-exclusive Bohemian Club, to which every Republican president since Herbert Hoover have belonged. This is just a quote. This is the Bohemian Grove ceremony, which was photographed or videotaped, very darkly, of course, very secretly, by one journalist, which caused a major furor. Now you can see very little in this light, so I'll explain to you what's happening there. In this forest, the men appear naked. Naked. They have to walk around naked. In fact, some members have left the society because they're tired of walking around naked. Now imagine every president of the United States has been a member of the Bohemian Grove. And just imagine. The priests are dressed in vestments, papal vestments, and they pay homage to an owl because the owl sees in darkness. It has illumination. There are other rituals which I do not want to talk about that happen between all these naked men. And if you read your Bibles, you will find that those who worshipped in the groves were called the perverted ones.
He is eternal, and we bow to beauty everlasting. For lasting happiness, return to one alone, and she surrounds you now. Great nature, refuge of the weary heart.
We bow to one alone, great nature.
He is ever faithful. Other friends may fail, so must he come as children. Little children that believe nor ever doubt her beauty and her faith. Bohemians and priests, our funeral pyre awaits the corpse of care. Great son of all mortal wisdom, Owl of Bohemia, we beseech thee, grant us thy counsel.
Owl of Bohemia, grant us thy counsel. Well, that's just a part of the ritual, which shows that it is nature worship. It is condemned in the Bible, and yet who are the members? Let's continue. This is an article in Mother Jones, August 1981, volume 6, page 28, and reports who the prominent members were. For example, George P. Shultz, Stephen Batchelor, Gerald Ford, Henry Kissinger, William Buckley. Can you imagine them all walking around naked, worshipping a stupid owl? I mean, that's so pathetic. Fred Hartley, Griffin, Haywood, Coors, Teller, Ronald Reagan, Clausen, George Bush, William French Smith, etc., etc., etc. It is pathetic. Modus operandi of the order. The activities of the order are directed towards changing our society, changing the world, to bring about a new world order. This will be a planned order with heavily restricted individual freedom. That's fascism. And I will show you the papal encyclicals that will make your hair stand on edge as to what is going to happen all over the world. And believe me, I live in a country where it's being implemented. And you can see it happening every single day. It is scary. But you don't have to be afraid if you know why it's happening. If you do not know why it is happening, you will despair, and there are thousands who are putting bullets through their head because they cannot tolerate it. 4,000 farmers driven off the land and murdered in my country alone. They lose everything, they lose hope, they put bullets through their heads, they wipe out their entire families because it's better for them to die than to live with it. And you know what? You give a lecture like this and you show what's behind it and why it's behind it, and guess what? They get hope. Because they see it's not just them and not something they don't understand. Once they start understanding the bigger picture, they gain hope. And they say, wow, so it's not really the end for us, because this is simply the sign that Jesus is coming soon. And there will be a better kingdom. Let us give our lives to Jesus Christ, because this world has nothing to offer. And they get hope. No constitutional protection if you go against it. They control education. I'll show you how in the lectures. Money, law, politics, economy, history, psychology, philanthropy, medicine, religion, media. There is nothing that they do not control. And remember, they are neither left nor are they right. So if there are right-wing parties and left-wing parties, they control them what? Both. That's the Hegelian principle. That's Hegelian logic. Remember that both Marx and Hitler, the extremes of left and right, presented as textbook enemies, evolved out of the same philosophical system, Hegelianism, that brings screams of intellectual anguish from Marxists and Nazis. Remember that the Jesuits were told that they must serve on this side and the other side. Remember that? And create conflict between the sides. This conflict of opposites is essential to bring about the change that they want. Today, this process can be identified in the literature of the Trilateral Commission, for example, where change is promoted under conflict management. Have you heard that name before? Right, conflict is essential. The state is absolute. So the state must have total control. That means the people must relinquish their rights to the state. Do you see that happening in the United States at the moment? Absolutely. So the state requires complete obedience. An individual does not exist for himself in these so-called organic systems, but only to perform a role in the operation of the state. That's exactly what it was like under Nazism. Here's Hegel. The two, Hegel and Kant, are the philosophers behind the system. I was stunned. I was in Europe 4 weeks ago, in Germany, and the leaders, the presidents of Germany, went down and put down wreaths in front of these people's graves and said, their philosophy has made the new Europe possible. They honored them. What a terrible, I would almost say satanic, well, why not just say it, philosophy. The Illuminati principle that the end justifies the means is also the principle of the group and the order, which is skull and bones. That means you can do anything, no matter how dastardly, as long as you achieve your aim. There's an outer circle, an inner core, all of these. Council of Foreign Relations is the outer circle, Trilateral Commission, all of those. Trilateral Commission was founded by David Rockefeller, comprises 200 members worldwide. The Bundy operation, activism towards a new world global order. George W. Bush, who was a member of Skull and Bones, remember, says that it's a big idea, a new world order where diverse nations are drawn together in a common cause. Only the United States has both the moral standing and the means to back it up. So, do you think they're trying to get all the countries of the world to come into this system, yes or no? Do you think it's possible that they are giving their power to a woman who rides them? Does it look like it? Who controls them? The Jesuits. And who do the Jesuits say all power must be under? The Pope. Isn't that correct? All right, so who do you think would clamor for a new world order more than anyone else? Maybe the Pope. Wouldn't that be interesting? Well, here he is. New international order urged for the sake of peace. When? January 3, 2004. His whole New Year's speech was dedicated to asking for the implementation of the New World Order. Vatican City, January 1, 2004. John Paul II started the new year by insisting that peace is possible and thus a duty, and he called for a new international order. CNN, what did that have to say? Pope calls for a new world order. Thursday, January 1, 2004. Vatican City, Pope John Paul rang in the new year on Thursday with a renewed call for peace in the Middle East and Africa and the creation of a new world order based on respect for the dignity of man and equality amongst nations. What did he say? This year, Pope John Paul directed his thoughts to the continuing conflict around the globe, but he stressed that to bring about peace, there needs to be a new respect for international law and the creation of a new international order based on the goals of the United Nations. He called for an order that is able to give adequate solutions to today's problems based on the dignity of the human being, this is human rights, on an integral development of society, on solidarity amongst nations, rich and poor, on the sharing of resources and the extraordinary results of scientific and technical process. You know, sharing of resources. Have you heard of that before? Well, there's another term for it. It's called redistribution of wealth. Have you heard of that before? Right. Now let me redefine that for you. To redistribute wealth means to take the wealth from the one who has it and give it to one who has not got it. Is that correct? Now if you do that, which nations of the world will be hardest hit? The Catholic ones or the Protestant ones? The Protestant ones are the rich nations. Everywhere you can draw a line. Now I will show you in the lectures that come that there are encyclicals which define how the redistribution is to take place. And how it is happening and how the encyclical says it should take place is what I can see happening in my country without the government lifting a finger against it. It is defined by need, as we will see. Now, there's another word for taking from one who has and distributing it to someone who does not have. It's called theft. Stealing. Thou shalt not steal, says the Bible. The Pope in Rome says, thou shalt steal. He does. Literally, I'll show you his encyclical. You will be stunned. This New World Order is going to be an exciting place. I don't want much part of it. Fortunately, my God says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, they would fight for me, but it is not of this world. My kingdom is
Amen,
up
by
there.
the way.
There where your treasure is, there your heart will be. I have managed, because I live where I live, to loosen myself from that which I own, because I know that it means nothing anymore. Do you know that in my country, if you go on a holiday, and you stay away for a while and you come back and your house is occupied, that you cannot put the new tenants out, even if the house is yours? Did you know that? Because they have need, therefore they have the right to take it. whether you own it or not. And this is not a joke, this is a fact. Scary. But who cares? I serve a God who has promised the most wonderful things, even temporal things, to those who serve him. Wonderful promises. I go to prepare a place for you, and I will come again to take you where I am also. In my Father's house are many rooms. I go. Actually, it doesn't mean rooms, it means mansions. God has prepared things for us which make this world sick by comparison. So let them have their kingdom, let them have their fun, because my God says this world will come to an end, and the kingdom of God will reign forever and ever and ever. Don't miss the next lectures. We're now on a roller coaster ride that will take you to exciting places. Thank you for coming.
Yep, shout out to WalterVeith. He's getting up there these days. Yeah, great guy. Excuse me. Yep. I don't know if you ever heard his story, but he was a professor until they tried to force him to teach evolution, and so he quit. And he's been teaching about all this stuff ever since, which I think is a better service to God and the world. So I don't know why my voice is messing up so much right now, but yeah, thanks for watching. Probably gonna roll out some tanks here shortly. It'll be pretty much right away, so look forward to that if you're interested. And yeah, thanks for watching once again. I'll catch you next time. And I'd like to do some more of this stuff in the future, maybe like whole series, because he's got tons and tons of stuff. Alright, till then.